long period of time. Let me explain why. The agreement went into effect in 2020, right at the time that COVID hit. So that immediately affected our economic business and trade among ourselves. After that stabilized, you're beginning to see, in my view, a pickup in trade and employment thanks to that agreement. I think what we're going to see is tremendous benefits for the three countries. Now, again, I'm not naive. We're not there yet. And I think we're seeing our trade increase even with tariffs nowadays, right? We're seeing investment. President Trump wants, naturally, every leader wants as much investment coming into their country. And that's a central part of the discussion. The US invests around $160 billion. That's the stock of US foreign direct investment in Mexico. Mexico, unknown to many Americans, has about 60. If you normalize that by the size of the economy, Mexico is actually investing more in the United States than in the United States in Mexico. And there are a lot of Mexican companies willing to invest more. And I think that's the certainty of having, the deal for the next 16 years is critical for them. And essentially in all sectors. Even if you talk to the agricultural sector here in the States, they want that certainty also because they export billions of dollars of grains to Mexico.
That does it for us here at Wall Street Week. I'm David Weston. See you next week for more stories of capitalism.
People ask me all the time, what is the key to being a really good investor? And I tell them it's to surround yourself with and work with the best investors you can find. On Bloomberg Wealth, I'm going to take you to meet the greatest investors in the world, the people that I would like to have managing my money.
As investors, we are always worried about the issue of the moment. Success is about time in the market as opposed to timing the market.
In case you missed it on Bloomberg Surveillance.
What is the worst Fed's response mechanism to inflation that is inflecting upward, given the fact that this Fed has been incredibly dovish? Are they going to wreck the party? I mean, ultimately, it's easy to be a skeptic, but I might as well join the party and not be so, skeptical, because you're not paid to be skeptical. You're not paid to poke holes. You are paid to just go with the mob.
Have we got that breaking news whoosh that drives across the screen? Can we play that now? Sort of breaking news.
It's the job. Come on.
Bramo, I think, going to look to confirm this, but I think Bramo just turned bullish. Is that what just happened?
I think that it just doesn't pay to be skeptical. You take a look at every single different benchmark.
Okay.
I mean, it's sort of, what are we trading people? We are trading them that you cannot lose, and that seems to be the way to go.
Bulls everywhere this morning, getting very nervous following that.
Don't miss Bloomberg Surveillance, live every weekday.
What is going to be the consequence for U.S. markets?
We are seeing modest gains across European equity markets.
Take a look at how we're faring when it comes to Asian markets.
Today's CFOs are reshaping the C-suite. Bloomberg's chief future officer shines a spotlight on these dynamic leaders. Furniture and home goods retailer Wayfair has long been a heavy hitter in e-commerce. Now it's branching out into brick and mortar stores, and CFO Kate Gulliver loves the challenge.
It is Pretty wild to be almost 25 years into the business and be launching an entirely new channel.
Watch Chief Future Officer only on Bloomberg.
Coming up on Bloomberg This Weekend, the U.S. and Iran trading fire again overnight. Iranian drones target American bases in the Gulf, while the U.S. strikes back against military sites as oil returns to pre-war prices. What the latest back and forth means for efforts to keep the Strait of Hormuz open.
Thank you for your endorsement. Louisiana loves you!
And another primary win for a Republican candidate backed by Donald Trump, this time in Louisiana. Republicans looking to hang on to power in Congress this November. This morning, we speak with New York Democrat Kate Conley, who's hoping to flip a key House seat.
And the knockout stage of the World Cup begins today. Team USA preparing for their big match this week, while fans from around the world descend on American cities. Welcome to Bloomberg This Weekend. We're coming to you live from Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York. I'm David Gura.
I'm Christina Ruffini. We're here with Lisa Mateo. It is Sunday, June 28th. Welcome to our listeners and viewers across all Bloomberg platforms on radio, TV, streaming, on Bloomberg.com, and of course, the Bloomberg Business app.
We are following the latest from the Middle East exactly 4 months after the war in Iran began. That latest round of strikes by the U.S., followed by Iran targeting U.S. installations in Bahrain and Kuwait. Iran's foreign minister is in Iraq right now. He has released a statement saying the ceasefire was violated.
That's right. And President Trump's social media statement threatening Iran last night, saying there may come a point when we are no longer able to reasonable and will be forced to militarily complete the job that we very successfully started. If that happens, the Islamic Republic of Iran will no longer exist, followed by an exclamation point. All right, we're going to go to Lisa Mateo now for an update on the headlines.
You got it. And another win for President Donald Trump in the GOP primary as Representative Julia Letlow wins the Republican nomination for U.S. Senate in Louisiana.
I knew it was going to be a tough race, and it was. It was filled with trials. But I'm so proud to say that I am truly battle-tested for November 3rd, and we're going to go win this thing!
Letlow defeated State Treasurer John Fleming in the two-candidate runoff after they finished ahead of the GOP Senator Bill Cassidy in the primary back on May 16th. Well, in other news, 4 people are dead after heavy rainfall in Kentucky. Governor Andy Beshear putting out a warning on social media yesterday.
Please do not drive after dark if you can avoid it. This is a serious enough situation where I am now signing a state of emergency so that we can deploy even more resources across Kentucky.
Well, to Venezuela now, where frustration continues to grow as the death toll from 2 powerful earthquakes, well, it surpasses 1,400. International rescue teams continue to join the effort, and many civilians, frustrated what they see as an inadequate government response, are pitching in to help. Well, the weekend of attacks continue in the Middle East, with Iran launching drone and missile strikes targeting Bahrain and Kuwait. Sirens sounded in Kuwait City early Sunday. The attacks, they were in response to U.S. airstrikes that hit the Islamic Republic. U.S. Central Command said Iranian military, surveillance, infrastructure, communications, air defense systems, drone storage facilities, and mine layer capabilities, they were all targeted. Iran's Parliamentary Revolutionary Guard, well, they threatened a complete halt to negotiations if Washington continues its attacks. The U.S. State Department released new details of the deal Lebanon and Israel signed in Washington Friday without Hezbollah. Under the agreement, Israel will withdraw from Lebanon, provided Hezbollah disarms. It calls for Israel to initially withdraw from 2 small areas called pilot zones. The Lebanese army will gradually assume full responsibility over those areas. And speaking at a news conference Saturday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, well, he called the framework agreement, quote, a historic achievement. Meanwhile, Israeli strikes hit the central Gaza Strip on Saturday evening. No casualties were immediately reported. Earlier in the day, an Israeli drone strike killed 2 Palestinian siblings in southern Gaza. The Israeli military said it was targeting a Hamas militant. David and Christina.
Lisa, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Lisa. All right, the already tenuous MOU agreement between the U.S. and Iran is in an even more fragile place this morning following Iran and the U.S. trading attacks. A Qatari ship was hit in the Strait of Hormuz on Saturday, and hours later, the U.S. U.S. says it conducted additional strikes on Iranian targets. In a separate update, the Joint Maritime Information Center raised the threat level to substantial in the Gulf for ships throughout the region.
Well, after that memo was signed, oil flows picked back up through the strait. But as Bloomberg notes, that oil flow, quote, remains far below pre-war levels and ships still face danger. One of the journalists behind that reporting is Alex Longley. Alex joins us now. Alex, let me just start with what the condition of the strait is today. So we've covered here the back and forth that we've seen in recent days, the way that there's been this kind of tit-for-tat fighting between the U.S. and Iran, and we can talk about the integrity of this ceasefire, the degree to which it actually is a ceasefire in a moment. But first, let's talk about the routes, the shipping routes that are being used right now. And my understanding is there are some new ones that have emerged over these last few months. Which one of these are ships taking? And for our viewers watching us on Bloomberg Television or streaming online, you can see that on our screen. But there are, what, 3 or 4 routes here that are being used by ships in the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, exactly. I think in the sort of, even before the interim peace deal was signed, we saw the US kind of quietly helping ships get through this route via the coast of Oman. And this was something that initially was kind of a very hush-hush arrangement. And you would see vessels kind of appear in the middle of the Indian Ocean days or maybe weeks later. As time has gone on, that Omani route has become more formalized. And after the interim peace deal, that's the route that the Western naval forces in the region recommended people use. Yesterday, we heard them say for the first time that route has now also been expanded. One of the concerns initially was that's quite a narrow waterway, and so you'd be limited in terms of the traffic flow there. But now it's been expanded so that ships can simultaneously go into the Persian Gulf and out of the Persian Gulf. So on one side, you have that, and that's the kind of, the Western Navy recommended route that we see. And then on the other side, you've got an Iranian route. Iran's PGSA, which was established during the war, has also issued its own kind of recommended path and said ships can only cross its way. And the reality is we're seeing vessels using both routes, and that has continued to be the case in the last 24 hours, even after we saw a ship attacked yesterday.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the reasons you're seeing both kind of hugging ships, I don't want to get yelled at, ships kind of hugging each coast.
They will write letters.
We will get emails if I call them boats. They are ships. Yes. I apologize. Is because there's this threat of straits in the waterway. The IMO says there's about 80 mines. Do you know how they're getting at that number? And as we've been covering this for weeks now, we haven't seen or heard of any damage from these mines. Are they real? Are they really there? Do we have any way to verify the things they dumped in were actually active? What is the status of this?
Yeah, and the mine story has been a really evolving one throughout the war, right? Like in the height of the conflict, I think there were a lot of kind of conflicting reports, some saying there was sort of suspected mines, some saying it was uncertain whether they were actually being laid. As you said, the IMO said on Friday, they were kind of the first people to put I guess a sort of a more concrete number. They said around 80. But again, it wasn't necessarily that specific, but it gives you a ballpark sense of what people operating in the area are kind of basing their assumptions on now. The reality of the mine picture is a story that's kind of steadily evolved. We've seen some reported sightings. The Pakistani Hydrographic Service is the main reporting body for some of these things, and they've issued a couple of mine sightings in Omani waters. There was one either last week or the week before, very close to this Omani passage route. And then to the question of kind of how much damage are they causing? Well, so far, it doesn't seem that they've caused very much, if any. Perhaps we don't know if there were kind of any incidents kind of at the peak of the conflict that may have been caused by them, but there's been no reporting of that so far. Interestingly, yesterday, again, the Western forces in the region published their first kind of mine danger area in the Strait of Hormuz. And I think one of the things that's notable about that is it's actually quite a substantial area, and it tells you a lot about why vessels certainly aren't comfortable transiting through the kind of the traditional highway that used to be kind of straight through the middle of Hormuz because of that ongoing risk. And there's still a lot of uncertainty as well about who's going to clear up those mines over time. It doesn't seem that there's kind of an internationally agreed process for doing that yet, although again, guidance in the area seems to say you can expect to see navies trying to clear mines. So it's possible that some things are happening in the background, but there's not been a big announcement saying these are the forces and these are the governments that are currently helping to minesweep the Strait of Hormuz.
Alex, let's end on the discomfort that you just described there, and I'm curious what you're hearing from shipping companies about the prospects of making their way through this strait now, what the insurance picture looks like. Yes, we hear from the president the strait is open. In real terms, what are companies saying about that?
I think one of the things about the idea of the strait being open or closed is probably one of the lessons from the war, I'd say, is we probably need to get beyond that, and that in reality, things have flown through the Strait for the entire conflict, and it's kind of it's been various degrees of open, some of which hasn't been very much. I think lots of companies are very cautious, rightly so, but we've still, even in the last week, seen companies that hadn't previously transited Hormuz getting their ships out that had been stuck there for weeks because they feel as though they can get naval support, or kind of military support, I should say, whilst escaping. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there have been companies that have been going into Hormuz throughout the war because they can make rich rewards for doing so. And so I think there is a wider pool even now of companies that are comfortable to transit Hormuz because they think that there's a system in place and they're less worried about hitting mines and stuff like that. And even today, as I said before, we're seeing oil tankers, for example, going through, not at the volume or the number that they were before the war, but also in a bigger volume than they were kind of in early March, when most of the Strait was closed and there was only a trickle of stuff going through in Iranian barrels. So I think it's a spectrum. I think the pool of people willing to go through has grown, but the more that these attacks continue, the more cautious end of the spectrum will start to kind of come back to the fore, and you'll see that growing again and people pausing transit. So it's really a kind of day-to-day thing, and you're seeing this kind of these different camps sort of expanding and contracting over time.
All right, Alex Longling joining us from London. He's our senior reporter there. Thank you so much.
Well, the war in Iran has had an unexpected beneficiary, and that's the nation of Panama. New reporting from Bloomberg says the Panama Canal is expecting better than predicted revenue this year due to increased traffic as more ships look for alternate routes to move commodities around the world.
Joining us now is Carlos Ruiz Hernandez. He is the former Vice Foreign Minister of Panama and a senior advisor at the Center for Strategic Studies. Carlos, it's nice to see you. I want to ask you, I mean, it's obviously been an interesting few years with the Panama Canal, but I want to talk first about what's happening now. I was reading from some of our own Bloomberg reporting that the canal is seeing as much as a 16% increase in traffic since the start of the Iran war conflict. How is the authority handling that? I mean, there are reports that it's almost nearing capacity.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for having me. Yes, I think I saw the reporting as well, and right now I'm currently in Panama, even though I'm based in D.C. But I think what the authority is doing is they're anticipating a lot of the risks that you were referring in your previous segment. They're anticipating the crisis. They're seeing the uncertainty around the MOU. This is not a peace treaty yet, and there are a number of variables that have redirect energy from the Panama Canal and towards Asia. And I think what they're doing is seeing and trying to anticipate anything that can go wrong so that they're ready to handle more and more traffic if it's needed.
Carlos, a roiling story has been, will Iran charge a toll? Will Oman charge a toll? And I think what's so fascinating about the Panama Canal is kind of the cost structure that's in place there. There's this auction component to it, that if you're a shipper and you want to get to the front of the line, you can place a bid on being able to do that. Could you talk a bit just about the economics of it? As Christina laid out a moment ago, the projection here is for revenues to be extremely high. Where is that money coming from? What are shippers paying for it to make their way through the Panama Canal?
Yeah, I think it's a market clearing auction. It's a system that's been in place in the Panama Canal, and if you want to get a little more into the mechanics, the Panama Canal Authority has a very, very well detailed process by they do that. It's not a toll hike. It's only 3 to 5 unreserved slots if they go to auction, and it reflects stability in the pricing. It reflects stability for the consumers, and it reserved transits. The vast majority of them run on fixed published rates. The system, what's going on right now is the system is doing its job. The Panama Canal. It's the whole premise of the business model is to be reliable, is to sit neutral at geopolitical shocks like this one. I mean, Panama has nothing to do in this conflict. We're just here to absorb that shock, and I think that's exactly what the Panama Canal is. Even with all the publishing of the future infrastructure investment, the shippers, the community, and the industry has always. When they if they're Panama Canal users, they always know that the system is there to help them if they need to. If they have some deadlines, they have to get to the ports, or a port is closed, they have to reroute. So the system is precisely there to do those things. And so far, it has worked exactly as it's designed to do, as it was designed for this kind of shocks.
If you look at Panama kind of being able to position itself as a safe haven for transit for these ships and vessels, How does Panama position itself geopolitically to make sure it maintains the optics of being a safe, neutral place to go? I mean, there was a moment not so long ago where the President of the United States was threatening to invade and repossess the canal, accusing Panama of giving an advantage to China. How does Panama balance its relationship between the U.S. and China? And now with everything going on the Gulf, what is Panama's relationships with that region as well? And is there anything you're looking towards making stronger ties with in the future?
Absolutely. I think, this last couple of years have been a little bit more of PR that we've expected usually, what we always handle. But I think Panama's message has been very clear and consistent. The Panama Canal is Panamanian. It operates neutrally. It's open to all flags equally. And that's exactly, for moments like this, is how why neutrality works. It absorbs energy shocks, and it guarantees that its largest user, which are U.S. companies, can go straight to do and continue doing their business. I mean, I think that the whole situation has relied on continuity and not risk. I mean, geopolitical headwinds, they'll come and go. It's a lot of what's happened in the last few years, very, very unfortunate, but the Panama Canal is ready for this kind of things. And I think that's exactly what we've done in the last couple of years, the government. And you got to remember, the Panama Canal authorities, it's completely separate from the government, but both institutions work well. And when geopolitics and great power competition have come to our shores, we've relied on those institutions to precisely do what they're designed to do. And Panama, on the canal side, we have the Panama Canal Authority has been around for about 40 years, and it's been total Panamanian for the last 25 years, since the year 2000. And we haven't had any big problems and major situations except the droughts, which are the real constraints, more than geopolitical headwinds. I mean, the relationship with the region is excellent. Our foreign minister and our authorities have been coming and going. We opened relations with Saudi Arabia this year. We're open embassies. We're literally preparing for this interconnected complexity that great power competition has brought to us.
Carlos, very quickly here, we've got 30 seconds. Let me just ask you, I know that Christina brought up the fact that President Trump made these threats against Panama. Has all of that been allayed? That's no longer an issue for Panama? They're not facing that kind of pressure that they'd faced before?
It's like I said, I mean, everything's continuity. I mean, right now here in Panama, we're focusing on doing business, staying neutral, stay allies to the United States. The contact is there. The diplomacy worked. It remained. We've hosted this past week the OAS General Assembly. Yep. We had Deputy Secretary of State here.
Oh, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much. Carlos Ruiz-Hernandez joining us from Panama.
All right, coming up next, Ukraine is stepping up its strikes on Russia's infrastructure. We're going to speak with Ben Rhodes, who is Deputy National Security Advisor to President Obama, about the path forward for Ukraine, about Iran, and his new book, All We Say. That is straight ahead on Bloomberg This Weekend, on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, Bloomberg.com, and the Bloomberg Business app.
In case you missed it on the opening trade.
We're holding our breath, and our economists put it very nicely in their recent research note. They're saying, for now, you got the support of tax refunds, so you had the fiscal support. This is running out right now. The real test for the consumer starts here.
How are you going to hold your breath for?
I'm holding my breath in two different ways. The first question is complicated.
Unpleasant.
Well, that's what you have to do as a market strategist. It's unpleasant, complicated, but also exciting, I would say. So we're holding our breath and saying, are you going to reopen that strait? Then secondly, if you don't reopen it, how long can you keep running down oil inventories to make up the shortfall? The equity market's pricing 90%. Prediction markets are saying it's a 30% probability that you reopen it by the end of June. And then if you don't get these supplies back soon, then within the next 3 months, you should start to see macro weakness, not just in Europe, not just in China, but also in the US.
Don't miss the opening trade, live every weekday.
Key investors, top executives, global innovators. Join me for in-depth conversations with the biggest newsmakers on the day's top stories. Insight with Haslinda Amin, only on Bloomberg.
In case you missed it on Balance of Power.
Are you worried about this type of rhetoric? We're now looking at an indefinite extension to the ceasefire.
I think patience and perseverance are what we need here. And bear in mind that the idea that somehow after 47 years of entrenching itself in power, that what the president first said, 4 to 6 weeks, was never realistic. And it's 8 weeks now. It's still not realistic. The issue, I think, is whether we can take back control of the Strait in order to allow Gulf Arab oil out onto international markets. And remember, some of that oil is going out through pipelines in Saudi Arabia and the UAE in any event. But we prohibit the exportation of Iranian oil, open the rest of the Strait to get the Arab oil out, calm the markets down. I think we should be prepared to take the time necessary to overthrow the regime. We'll regret it if we let them up and find out later.
Don't miss Balance of Power live every weekday. In case you missed it on Bloomberg Tech Asia.
Humanoids are particularly interesting for many reasons. One is that they can actually go into regular everyday environments, which were designed for humans. The other reason from the machine learning perspective is that humanoids have the shape of humans. So perhaps we can learn from humans doing different tasks and transfer that onto humanoids.
Don't miss Bloomberg Tech Asia every month.
Good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Welcome back to the opening trade.
It's Bloomberg Money.
This is the Asia Trade.
This is Wall Street Week. Welcome to Balance of Power.
You're watching Bloomberg Deals.
Welcome to Bloomberg This Weekend.
This is Bloomberg Television.
Thank you for joining us on Bloomberg This Weekend. I'm Lisa Mateo. Let's update you on today's top stories. Wildfire activity. Well, it is intensified across western U.S., killing 3 firefighters, injuring 2 others on the Colorado-Utah border. The latest blaze, the Cottonwood Fire in southeast Utah, it grew Saturday to more than 144 square miles after barreling through canyons and mountainsides, destroying part of a ski resort. This resident says he may have lost his cabin.
I haven't been able to get up to it to see exactly what, but it was at high-low, and it isn't there any longer, so at least I'm sure it isn't.
Experts say the danger is even higher this year because of Utah's record low snowpack and its warmest winter on record. President Donald Trump says he's nominating a former Oklahoma State trooper and U.S. Marine as the next director of ICE. In a social media post, the president said that Lance Schroyer is a proven leader with decades of experience locking out the worst of the worst. New Department of Homeland Security Secretary Mark Wayne Mullen, well, he praised Schroyer as a great pick to protect the American people. His nomination still must be approved by the Senate. And thousands gathered in soaring temperatures in Budapest on Saturday to celebrate the 31st annual Pride. Now, this is the first LGBTQ plus march since the former Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who tried to ban the event, was ousted in the April election. And today, Pride parades, they will take place in New York City and in San Francisco. David and Christina.
Thank you very much. Quite the energy there in Budapest. Yes. People are very excited for a new chance. All right. Overnight, the U.S. and Iran continued strikes against one another after both sides accused the other of violating the agreed-upon ceasefire deal.
Joining us now is the former Deputy National Security Advisor under the Obama administration, Ben Rhodes. He's also author of a new book called All We Say, A History of the United States in 15 Speeches. Ben, it's great to have you with us, and I want to start with a term we just heard, a shaky ceasefire. You can add other modifiers to that, fragile, tenuous. I look at the reporting overnight. Yeah. Amorphous, sure. An unnamed U.S. official told CNN after the U.S. strikes that the action did not constitute a return to major combat operations for now. Is this still a ceasefire as you see it, given what we've seen play out over the last 3-4 days?
I think it is in the sense that the terms are pretty clear, right? I mean, when we actually see text or get briefed on text of what's in the agreement, there's not a lot of dispute about what's in there. And it involves Iran being able to get revenue on the front end through the sale of oil and the wave of sanctions on those sales in return for opening the strait and the end of the blockade, and then some period of negotiation. I think part of what is going on, David, is that the posturing around what's in the terms of the deal deal is upsetting the ability to implement the deal and get into negotiations. You have, particularly on the U.S. side, I think, President Trump's sensitive to criticism, and sometimes he goes out and he says, he makes threats against the Iranian delegation, or he's kind of spinning the deal in a certain way that probably upsets the Iranian hardliners, who then feel like they have to do something to demonstrate that they still control the Strait of Hormuz. And so I think what you have here is negotiators have a text, but the kind of hardliners on both sides are probably not entirely happy with the fact that there's a deal at all. And then you get these kinds of incidents where there's kind of tit for tat. It's still a ceasefire unless and until these go beyond kind of one-for-one strikes. There's a very careful discipline, frankly, on the exchanges of fire that have taken place to date. If you see that start to spiral, then I think we're in a different territory.
And some of those threats from the president have come while negotiators were literally in the room together. Talk to us, as somebody who's handled some of these sensitive negotiations, how difficult it can be to keep those talks on the rails when outside factors keep trying to push in and can make people feel like they have to make a decision that they might not want to when they are genuinely trying to come to some sort of a deal.
It's a great question, because I can tell you, right, when we were doing communications around Iran nuclear negotiations, sometimes we would go out and talk about the kinds of concessions that we were pushing for at the negotiating table. And the Iranian negotiators would tell us, hey, you're creating huge problems for me with the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, the more hardline elements inside of my government. Can we tone down the talk until the deal is done? I never threatened to destroy Iran or to, potentially kill the negotiators. I mean, what Trump's doing goes so far beyond just a kind of normal effort to put the best light on a deal you're negotiating. So I can imagine, I don't know for sure, but I can imagine that you've got these Iranian negotiators in a room in Europe. They're trying to put the finishing touches on a deal. They've got some hardliners back home, the IRGC, who are much stronger today than when we negotiated that deal, because the IRGC are the ones that control the Strait of Hormuz. They're the ones who fundamentally control the Iranian government. And so if something happens, if something is said that they don't like, well, they're going to demonstrate their capacity to shut down the Strait of Hormuz again, which is what they've been doing. And so I think, it's not going to be easy, but unless and until the Trump administration and the president himself can kind of stay off Truth Social here, I think you might have these kinds of flare-ups.
I want to take advantage of the experience that you had in those negotiations. We talk a lot about how this set of negotiators doesn't have the technical expertise that you and your colleagues had when you were brokering this now.
Or even the support staff and the apparatus behind them.
The legions of people with expertise. I'll ask you to be as optimistic as possible here, knowing now that we have fewer than 60 days for some sort of resolution here. What could or what should this administration do to, when they come back to the table, when these negotiations continue, be able to marshal enough expertise or technical information to be able to make some advances here in these talks?
Well, you're right. I mean, I think these talks are kind of the outlines of how do you get into negotiations around the nuclear program. And I think Qatar and some other countries have probably done a lot to help shepherd this. If you get into actual nuclear negotiations, what are the constraints on Iran's enrichment? What kind of inspections regime is going to be necessary to assure that they're keeping their commitments? How do you kind of implement sanctions relief? We relied, as you said, our negotiators. I mean, Ernie Moniz was a nuclear physicist, Secretary of Energy. But underneath that, we had the best nuclear experts in the government. We had experts on Iranian politics. We obviously had experts on sanctions so that you could figure out ways to get them relief without lifting everything. My advice would be to get the very best people you can find in the U.S. government. This administration is not, prioritize expertise. They prioritize loyalty or kind of deal making, what Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff present themselves as. You need to know these Iranian negotiators, some of them are the same people that negotiate with us. They've been dealing with nuclear negotiations for literally decades. And my concern, David, is that actually there's going to be no deal, right? There'll be some deal to get into the talks. Iran will get a bunch of revenue from selling oil and getting to profit off those sales. That will lessen the pressure on their economy. They'll put in place some kind of tolling regime for the Strait, and they'll just keep punting. They'll just punt beyond 60 days, and we'll never get a nuclear deal. And so Iran will get the revenue. They'll get to demonstrate they control the Strait, but we really won't get kind of verifiable nuclear commitments. That to me feels like actually the most likely outcome, even if it's not the one that I would like.
Ben, going against my nature here, I'm going to try to be optimistic and say that, okay, if there is some sort of a nuclear deal made, there's now the issue of what that will look like. Originally, the president said he wanted to remove all this nuclear material, what he keeps calling nuclear dust, and what is actually canisters potentially buried underground. Now there is more discussion that it would maybe be able to be mixed down to a less weapons-ready quantity. What are the drawbacks of doing that? What is the best solution? Is there a third option that we're not speaking about here? And where does the IAEA come in?
Well, yeah, they shipped most of their stockpile out, the vast majority under the previous nuclear deal negotiated in the Obama administration. The problem with just diluting it down on Iranian soil is that they can kind of re-enrich it, right? They can kind of take it back up to weapons grade. I think if you're looking for some kind of third way here, your question indicates that the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, is the impartial third party here that could, in some fashion, assure the downblending to a point where it's not usable for other purposes, that is shipping parts of it out of the country, so you're kind of lessening their capacity to kind of surge back to a stockpile capability, or perhaps even kind of taking it into some kind of custody, if not inside of Iran, inside of a third country. You know, you just want to limit Iran's capacity to move quickly in the direction of having enough fuel for a weapon. So you want less centrifuges operating at a lower level with tight restrictions and inspections on those, ideally no stockpile, if not a downblended stockpile under international supervision. That was easier to do when you had the UN Security Council as part of the negotiations, which we did. But still, I think getting the IAEA on the ground should be a priority for this administration. The optimistic scenario is that they're the ones who are kind of in charge of monitoring this whole regime.
And this is going to be a crucial issue at the Ankara summit here in a couple days. They're also going to talk about Ukraine. I assume, and Mark Rutte, the Secretary General, was at the White House this week talking about sort of the state of play between Ukraine and Russia. Let's take a listen to what he had to say after his meeting with President Trump.
He acknowledged that Ukraine is doing well on the battlefield, is doing well in terms of hitting some of the critical infrastructure in Russia. I really think that over the last 3 to 6 months, Ukraine is doing much better.
Doing much better, Ben, seemingly despite the U.S. What do you make of the U.S.'s engagement here, and are you optimistic that the U.S. is going to do more here to take advantage or capitalize on the fact that Ukraine has taken very positive steps here, moving its attack lines toward Moscow and making some inroads?
I think there's a real opening here because the way I look at this, David, is that for some time in the war, time was working for the Russians. They were wearing down the front line. It was a war of attrition that they were prevailing on kind of inch by inch. Now with these drone attacks deep into Russia, time is working for the Ukrainians. Like they are imposing a cost on Russia, on the Russian economy, on Putin politically. And so that gives Putin an interest to actually make a deal in which he doesn't try to get everything he wanted. He came to Alaska for that Trump summit, basically demanding his surrender terms on the Ukrainians. My concern is that the Trump administration lacks capacity in this area, lacks credibility with the Ukrainian side, and has frankly been distracted by the Iran war and other things. I think what you need is some kind of impartial negotiating framework to come into play, because both Russia and Ukraine, for the first time in a while, do have some interest in seeing this war at least frozen, at least getting to a ceasefire. And so I think if the U.S. and Europe could put together some kind of mediating framework, there is a window to try to do something here, given the interest in both sides in halting the fighting. We'll see, though.
And before we let you go, I do want to ask you your take on how the Russian population feels about Putin. Now, I know polling in Russia is either non-existent or completely non-reliable. And also the other issue here is there's no real alternative because he hasn't allowed any kind of alternative. I know pressure is mounting on Putin, but does that really functionally mean anything? And will it do anything to change his mind in this conflict?
I actually don't think it matters in the near term. Putin's dug in. He's entrenched in power. He's getting older. This is his legacy. I think what we've seen in Russian history is that the kind of bill comes due later, right? It took many years for the war in Afghanistan to begin to contribute to crumbling the edifice of the Russian state, the Soviet state, that is. So I think he may be feeling a little more pressure. Frankly, he's also getting pressure from the right to ratchet things up and escalate in Ukraine. At the end of the day, I think if he feels like he's hit a cul-de-sac in the war, that might put some pressure on him to try to reach some kind of frozen conflict type settlement, which I think would be preferable for everybody. But in terms of kind of fundamental existential pressure on Putin, I think he's going to be able to withstand this for the short term at least.
Ben, always good to talk to you. Thank you very much. Ben Rhodes there, former Deputy National Security Advisor. His new book is called All We Say, A History of the United States in 15 Speeches. An essential read here as we approach the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Ben, thanks once again. And Christina, talking about Russia, I'm struck by what we talked about with Stephanie Baker last week, the fact that the contours of this war seemingly have changed dramatically, as the
importing
Secretary General was saying.
gasoline for the first time. This is one of the world's largest oil producers is going to have to import gasoline because of these strikes.
Feeling a lot of pressure, including direct pressure on its energy infrastructure. So something to watch here going forward to that NATO summit and beyond.
Should be interesting. All right, and speaking of oil, prices have fallen sharply after the ceasefire MOU with Iran, but prices are still up at the pump. So why is that happening? We're going to talk to Bloomberg Intelligence Mike McGlone. That's coming up next on Bloomberg This Weekend. Catch us on all the platforms: Bloomberg TV, Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Streaming, and of course, the Bloomberg Business app. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the world of decentralized finance. Bloomberg is covering all things crypto, the people, the transactions, and the technology. Bloomberg Crypto, Tuesdays only on Bloomberg.
Mind being called an ideological lunatic or a bunch of left-wing nut jobs?
You know, I've been called worse things than that.
23andMe, I think, is so incredibly valuable. We're coming back.
What magazines were you reading as a kid?
I don't think I was reading magazines until I was in them.
So is it Paradise Ahead or Gattaca?
Maybe somewhere in the middle.
Making money isn't about drowning in emotions. It's about understanding what's actually happening. Markets are the best way to glean signal from noise, and that is what we try to do every morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Technology is embedded in every aspect of our lives, and that revolution is playing out in real time. From finance to defense tech, AI to entertainment, from the road to the stars. Bloomberg is bringing you the stories of companies and people that are pushing tech to new frontiers, and the politics reshaping global tech markets. I'm Ed Ludlow, live in San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Tech.
Every weekday, only on Bloomberg Television.
Power Players is back to take a look under the hood of the business of Formula One. Hi, I'm here to see Pierre Gasly.
Welcome to my workplace.
Do you feel pressure?
Massive pressure.
Ferrari is the best example that we can be very proud of the past to look after the future.
From the iconic brand setting the standard, oh boy, can you imagine Ferrari without racing?
No, and I say no, no, no.
To the newcomers forging ahead.
I grew up my whole life racing against the boys.
This global phenomenon continues to chart new territory.
This was a tennis court 8 days ago.
I can't even believe that. And the speed of the business has never moved faster.
My career might stop. I'll still be driving some.
Yeah, probably very fast.
Yeah.
This is so exciting!
This season, we're along for the ride.
The trading day is about to start.
And you're already looking for that edge.
The opening trade brings you everything you need to know as markets open across Europe.
I'm Guy Johnson.
I'm Anna Edwards.
And I'm Tom McKenzie.
This is your opening trade.
Only on Bloomberg.
At 9:30 a.m., the market tells you what it's really thinking.
We beat the drum to the opening bell.
With deep analysis of the forces driving the price action.
Focusing investors on what really matters.
Where the money flows, which markets are changing.
Conversations with players shaping the narrative.
Innovative growth companies gravitate to NASDAQ.
It's not just like, let's buy the Mag 7 or AI.
That's a really compelling story.
This is where your trading day begins.
And this is Open Interest.
Only on Bloomberg.
When news breaks,
a redhead across the Bloomberg terminal.
Bloomberg has you covered.
Trump's global tariffs are struck down by the U.S. Supreme Court.
For all the context and clarity you need.
There's going to be now tons of tariff headlines until midterm elections.
Hear it first on Bloomberg.
Oh, hello there. Just wanted to say, Primer is back. We've been scouring the frontiers of science and technology to help explain the difference between the next gold rush and whatever this thing is. And in season 2, we're upping the stakes. More danger.
Now that is some high-grade uranium mineralization.
We used to have a stable climate on this Earth. Right now, we do not.
more science.
We're pushing the envelope of technology in multiple directions: software, hardware, chemistry, physics.
The cable is like very cold.
And more CEOs that can nail the photo shoot.
Hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars are at stake. While the problems are economic, the solutions are too.
And yes, we will be talking about AI.
There is a lot of humanoid hype out there.
But our future doesn't run on hype. It runs on innovation. Watch season 2 on all these lovely channels.
In case you missed it, on The Pulse.
It's a $75 billion IPO, the largest in history. I think it presages the beginning of a pretty sizable wave of IPOs, which we're excited about. I also think it shows you that the capital markets, led by the U.S. capital markets, but the global capital markets are demonstrating a willingness to finance this AI infrastructure build and this build in space, which is quite exciting.
Don't miss The Pulse, live every weekday.
Thank you for joining us live on Bloomberg This Weekend. I'm Lisa Mateo. Let's get you updated on today's top stories. Another sign of AI infrastructure constraints. Google has placed limits on Meta Platform's use of its Gemini artificial intelligence models. Now, the Financial Times says it's because it couldn't provide as much computing capacity as the social media company wanted. The restrictions have affected Meta's internal projects, and also the company has told staff to make more efficient use of AI tokens. To the PGA Tour, where the Travelers Championship winds down at TPC River Highlands in Connecticut. Topping the leaderboard, Victor Hovland at 20 under par. He's followed by Scotty Scheffler at 19 under par. And Patrick Cantlay and Akshay Bhatia, they're both tied at 15 under par. In World Cup action yesterday, a lot of it. Croatia topped Ghana 2-1. Colombia and Portugal tied at 0-0. Algeria, Austria tied at 3 apiece. England beat Panama 2-0. Congo defeated Uzbekistan 3-1, and Argentina topped Jordan 3-1. Today, the round of 32, it begins with South Africa taking on Canada this afternoon. And Wimbledon kicks off tomorrow at the All England Lawn Tennis and Croquet Club in London, England. And all eyes, yes, are on Serena Williams, the 44-year-old star. She hasn't played professionally since her farewell at the 2022 U.S. Open, but she accepted a wild card entry to play women's doubles with her sister Venus. And then she accepted another to play singles. She's going to play her first singles match at the event in 4 years on Tuesday when she faces number 53 Maya Joint in the first round. David and Christina, good to see Serena back.
That's really cool. That makes me happy.
It's good to see her back.
This is a sport I will watch and participate in. Yeah, I used to play some very bad tennis, so I will. I know the rules. This one I can do. So
and you mentioned that Congo game. I mean, that was a great victory for them. I mean, it's a real underdog story.
And Argentina.
The country dealing with so much right now, but yeah. Cool.
Sports, bringing us together. Sports. I'm coming around on the sports, guys. I'm coming around. Thanks, Lisa. All right, today marks 4 months since the start of the war in Iran. And in many ways, we're kind of right back to where we started, with drones and missiles flying and dispute over the Strait of Hormuz.
Oil prices are also back where they began. Brent crude closing Friday at pre-war levels, around $70 a barrel. With more, let's bring in Mike McGlone, senior commodity strategist for Bloomberg Intelligence. And Mike, Christina has a host of questions about the Strait. We're going to get into all of that in a minute, but I want to go to your most recent note. You talk about the superabundance trends in the Western Hemisphere and the major reversion that perhaps we are looking at in the second half of the year here. You're forecasting or expecting we might get to $40 a barrel on WTI. Explain how we could get there.
Yes, well, hello. The key way we get there is by pumping prices up too much, and it accelerates the process of superabundance in the Western Hemisphere, most notably U.S. As of right now, the U.S. and Canada are running a surplus of supply versus demand in crude oil and liquid fuels around 7 million barrels a day. If prices don't go lower and shut that off, we're probably going to head towards 10 million barrels a day by 2028. It's not just crude oil. We have to export our corn, soybeans, and wheat. It's a wonderful thing of superabundance. It's just bad for prices. What I think we just did is we re-accelerated that process with prices going up, and it has inklings very much of 2008. Crude oil peaked at 147, and by the end of the year, it was around 40. We are doing that right now, and I'll just give you one example. At the beginning of the year, we had pumps and then dumps and just Bitcoin and natural gas. And now that list includes gold, silver, platinum, palladium, iron ore, corn, and potentially U.S. Treasury bond yields. So the key theme is, right now, for the second half of the year, I think all those prices are going to continue to go lower.
Okay, but this is where, as a foreign policy nerd versus a finance nerd, I get annoyed.
Yeah.
Because the traffic in the Strait is hardly back to pre-war levels. So why are we seeing this confidence in the oil markets that these prices are going down? Why is it dropping so shortly when the reality on the ground isn't really reflecting that yet?
Because we're finding out the one of the most significant bull markets in commodities is increasing elasticity. When prices go up, markets find ways around it. We're finding out that OPEC is becoming increasingly redundant. Now, the UAE has left, so they're going to be drilling at will. Iraq has threatened to leave. They want to drill at will. So what's happened is it accelerated Mr. Trump's mantra of drill at will on a global basis. Now that includes Venezuela, U.S., Canada, UAE. Iraq potentially. So it's what's happening in the space. And what was before the problem was the key thing to remember is technology is bad for prices in crude oil on both sides of supply and demand. It's creating more supply and reducing demand. And this event, just like it did in 2022 when Russia invaded Ukraine, just adds fuel to those trends. So I look at it as, yes, we might bounce. There might be something really bad to happen in the Gulf. Maybe crude oil gets in there at 80, but on a normal cycle, it goes back to 40. And one key theme to remember is almost every time you have swoons in crude oil, it happens with the stock market going down. And we have volatility picking up everywhere in the stock market. It's just prices are still hovering at those levels. So if we get a little dip for a normal midterm year, that means everything goes down. Crude oil and copper are kind of next on the list in commodities.
It's adding fuel to those trends, David. Did you hear what he did there? It's adding a little bit of an oil pun there.
That's an oil pun, energy pun. I want to ask you about the president's comments on gasoline prices in specific. So this week he raised the prospect of us getting $2.50 a gallon gasoline once again. He's also had a very strong message to the gas companies, the gasoline companies, the energy companies themselves. Let's play a little bit of what the president has said, the anger that he's directing at those gas companies.
We are not seeing anything at the pump by comparison to what it should be. We should be, in my opinion, at $2.25. ExxonMobil, it's Chevron, it's Shell, it's BP. They're not reducing the prices commensurate with what's happening. We are doing a big investigation on it.
Mike, I'm going to go out on a limb here and guess you would say we don't have to do a big investigation on this. Why aren't gas prices lower as we see oil prices dropping?
Well, if he wants to do investigation, he should start with futures traders because those retail prices are spot on with the wholesale gasoline price. They're all going lower. He's right. But there's much more of a lag. Remember, that's retail. It's on the street what you pay. And then what we deal with crude oil, that's wholesale. The key theme, though, is I think he's right. Prices will go back down to where they were before the war, but now we're in summer driving season. That's when prices are typically high. So by the time we get the midterms, before the invasion, before the war in Iran, prices, the average price in the U.S. was running around $2.90 a gallon. Right now, it's $3.90. I think we go back down to $2.90. The key thing to remember, though, is every single time we've made those lows below 2 have coincided with a little bit of problem in the stock market. And that's what I'm really worried about for the second half of the year. I think he's going to get those lower prices, but if it comes on the back of a stock market, that is a potential thing he's not going to want for the midterms.
Mike, I also want to ask you about my favorite subject, which is gold. I feel like it's had an interesting 6-month run. And earlier this week, it dipped below $4,000 an ounce for the first time since last November after gaining for quite a few months in a row. Silver's also dropping. Do we know why? And what happens if interest rates go up this year? How is that going to impact the prices?
Well, that's part of the reason gold's starting to go back down. It was very precedent for the war. It peaked right before the war. But the problem with gold, silver, most notably precious metals, is they just went up too much. At the beginning of the year, gold reached its highest ever versus a Bloomberg Commodity Index. It was a 40-year high versus a 60-month moving average. And most significantly, versus a treasury market, the treasury bond market, it's right now the lowest. Our treasuries are about the lowest in almost since 1980s, early 80s versus gold. So to me, gold put in a pretty significant high back in Q1. And it's probably going to be stuck in a range for years. That's usually how it works. The significance is, though, it just went up too much. And another thing to remember about precious gold and certainly silver is you're supposed to be selling when they're yelling.
Should have hawked my jewelry when I had the chance. Sorry, David, go ahead.
No, Mike, very quickly here, our bosses say Mike McGlone can talk about anything. He's an expert on so many things. You raised a rhetorical question in your piece, which is, what does the President of the United States want when it comes to energy prices? And I'm going to give you 30, 45 seconds to answer that. If you kind of try to analyze the psychology of him vis-a-vis the energy market, what's the answer?
Well, that's been my key theme all along, why prices will not stay up. They will go down because he's the leader of the world's largest energy producer and next exporter, and he needs prices to go down, partly because inflation is the #1 issue and affordability is the #1 issue in elections.
All right, Mike Malone, who can indeed talk about anything. Thank you so much for joining us on this Sunday. Always nice to hear from you.
Interesting just what he was talking about there, this kind of impulse to kind of pump up prices and see that dumping happening, not just in gas, oil, energy prices, but across the commodity spectrum. And I think that merits us watching going forward here. But as you bring up, it's happening in metals, precious metals as well.
These durable commodities are less durable than they used to be. As somebody who's new to this level of knowledge and finance, I find that so fascinating.
Yes.
These things that even I remember my grandparents investing in are just not as stable price-wise as they once were. All right, when we come back, Lisa's BT Dubs stories. Everything you've not heard of this week, she's going to get you covered. You've heard of driverless cars. Well, what about cars without brake pedals? That sounds terrifying.
I'm intrigued and terrified. You can explore live streaming news and interviews, all our Bloomberg TV shows, documentaries, reporter analysis, and more, all in one place. Check out Bloomberg.com/videos. Stay with us.
My old mentor, Roger Staubach, who told me when I transitioned, football will never leave you, but you need to leave it.
Wow.
Everyone has a dream, and a lot of dreams are, my dream is to play football and play professional football, and you get the dream comes true, but it is going to end. And the day it ends, the day before it ends, you're one of the best in the world. Great. The next day you wake up, that's gone. What are you great at? And the truth is nothing, right? I'm not great at anything else.
I talk about it all the time, Steve, is this whole idea of it's not from penthouse to penthouse. And what I mean by that is you played for 15, 20 years and you're in the penthouse. That doesn't mean that you come to the business world and you're going to be in the penthouse. You don't start on the 3rd floor or the lobby. You actually have to start in the basement.
Jobs Day, and Bloomberg has the report under surveillance.
Things have started to pick up in this economy based on the jobs number.
But there is a lot of concern about why the labor market is not keeping pace with what we're seeing right now in the AI space.
This Thursday, Jonathan, Lisa, Anne-Marie, and Mike will bring you crucial data and expert analysis at terminal speed.
The unsaid thing is that we're basically at full employment.
Apparently the labor market right now, not a problem.
The June Jobs Report, Thursday on Bloomberg.
As an exchange, what can you do to make it more attractive to be a publicly traded company?
Talk to our customers. We spend a lot of time with our listed companies, listening to their concerns, and then act as an advocacy group for those companies to allow a company to tell their story in the most efficient way possible and reward them for the good disclosures that they are making in the market.
Is there any sort of financial innovation that you could drive to get more companies to list? Tokenization has come up.
Well, we did announce our tokenization initiative earlier this year. We already built the technology, we've already done a variety of proof of concepts. It allows for instantaneous settlement 24/7, but it is going to be a platform that runs in parallel to our more traditional exchanges.
Technology is embedded in every aspect of our lives, and that revolution is playing out in real time. From finance to defense tech, AI to entertainment, from the road to the stars. Bloomberg is bringing you the stories of companies and people that are pushing tech to new frontiers, and the politics reshaping global tech markets. I'm Ed Ludlow, live in San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Tech.
Every weekday, only on Bloomberg Television.
Welcome back to Bloomberg This Weekend, or BT Dubs, as I like to call it, BTW, as David Gura likes to call it. I'm Christina Ruffini. That's David Gura. That's Lisa Mateo. She's going to join us with some of the stories you might have missed this week. All right, Lisa.
All right, this one is going to bring back some memories for you guys. We'll take you back to the 90s, okay?
Oh, the 1990s.
Yes. Remember hacky
No, the
sacks?
1890s.
The 1890s. Remember hacky sacks, right?
Yes.
They were the fun things. Okay,
definitely.
This is on Bloomberg. Okay, this is on the terminal. Hacky sacks are cool again. weekend and somehow cost $23.
Well,
Of course they do.
Of course,
I find that insane.
So, they're the little, round little bags, right? You kick them around with your feet, your hands, and you try to do all these things to just balance them and not let it hit the floor. See these guys here, they're doing it. They're doing the little hacky sack. I actually saw a lot of kids doing this. My daughter was playing softball, and the boys' baseball team was there, and they were doing this. So it's back because of social media. People have been posting about it, and it's getting kids to start and buy them again. Now the stores are selling out of these things. They were about $5 to $15. Now they can go up as much as $23.
Inflationary environment.
On eBay, you can get it for like $65.
So hacky sack also not a durable commodity.
No.
But
Did you do this as a very young child in the 1990s?
I did. No, but it stuck around for a while, especially I was in Colorado Springs. We were always like 10 years behind everybody.
Well.
But like the cool counterculture boys, and I use counterculture very lightly, were always hacky sacking in like the quad, and I always thought they were very cute.
Yeah. Well,
yeah. And this is not a bad
back.
trend, right?
It's not a
People
bad
are
trend.
interacting, they're going outside.
Yeah, because this is like
this seems wholesome.
Gen Alpha, Gen Z, like they grew up with like iPads. So this is helping them get out and, get some exercise and get off of their devices.
Except to learn how to do it on YouTube, I guess.
It's true.
Eventually they're getting outside.
Right.
I support this.
Interesting. I'll keep an eye out.
All right, this one is for you, Christina. Doggies. I love the doggies.
I'm turning into a crazy dog lady on this.
Here we go. How USMNT's World Cup campaign is being helped by puppies Bud, Drew Pop, and Bloom. Okay, so this is the U.S. men's soccer team, right? They get a visit from these 3 special little guests. So this is their way to kind of recoup. Like they get the massages and they refuel, but this is part of their recovery mission. They have a marketing promotion. It's Purina and Wags for Walks. But more soccer teams are doing this because they say the dogs make them feel better. It brings a team together. Like it's a little bit more team bonding experience.
I've noticed that when you bring your dog in, we all come together.
But it's like
David, do you feel like we're bonded more when Brutus is here?
Yes. No, it's,
No, he doesn't.
it's a thing to remark on and
you were asking me the other day because I said something about talking to somebody in the park. You said you talk to other dog owners in the park. You do. So the dog does kind of give you, much like hacky sack, something to kind of circle around and talk about.
Maybe you can combine both. Maybe Brutus would eat the hacky sack.
Brutus would fetch it and run off
and not bring it back.
100%. Yeah.
You don't have a dog,
I
Lisa,
love
do
it.
you?
I don't, no, but they say like studies show it can help with your heart rate. Like it just, when you see a dog, it makes a lot of people like feel better.
Yes.
Like when I see Brutus, I'm like, oh, come here, little one. It's the cutest thing. It makes you feel better.
I don't get the similar reaction from David, but I get it from Lisa, and it makes me very happy. So thank you, Lisa.
All right, we'll go.
Okay, now here's a question for you. When you're feeling a little under the weather, do you go and you Google things? Do you go to ChatGPT?
Absolutely.
Do you go to WebMD?
All the
places?
symptoms, yeah.
Okay, there's a new place that people are going to. Okay, so this is in the New York Times. It says the doctor, the patient, and the podcaster.
Oh, no.
So a lot more people, they're going to their doctors, with questions because they've heard it on a podcast. So doctors are dealing with this now. They've always had to deal with hey, I Googled this and I think I should be taking this, that doctors deal with. But now they're hearing entire episodes.
Hours in length.
Yes, some doctors are okay with it. They think that it, people are embracing taking their health in stride. Like they're taking it advantage of it.
Proactive.
So,
they want to know what's happening.
I was losing my words there. Thank you. But other doctors are saying, you know what? You have to look at some of these guys. Like, what are their credentials? Like these podcasters, are they doctors? Are they holistic practitioners?
Okay.
That's another word that's out there.
That one has come up a lot in my life.
Yeah. So it's hard. It's back and forth. I mean, a lot of studies show that a lot of more people are getting them from these podcasters.
Interesting.
And they have millions and millions of followers. So more people are listening to them, and doctors are just getting a little frustrated at the same time.
I see that. I think my doctor's getting a little frustrated.
Just with you in general.
Yeah, I was
Not with
about to
me.
say.
Oh, yeah, just with me. Very good. Well played. 1 point for you
there
on that
you
one.
Go.
No, I think
Have
it's
you
like
mentioned
it's because
stuff like this?
well, not podcast necessarily, but like people will come in thinking they've diagnosed themselves in advance of going to the appointment, and I think they're just kind of like, okay, like we'll get through this. But
I can't imagine. I can't imagine going through that many years of school to have someone come in and be like, hey, I saw this thing on my phone. I would not.
I also just don't need to like foster my hypochondria by like listening to 3 hours on whatever medical issue somebody has.
Because so many of them are like amorphous and they're just symptomatic.
Maybe I do have that.
Right? I'm tired today. I can have all the things. It's not because I got up at 3 a.m. It's because of all the things.
Of course.
All right, Lisa, what else you got?
All right. Last one I got. This one's on Bloomberg too. It's about, U.S. set to end brake pedal requirements for driverless vehicles. Okay, so DOT's National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, they're looking into it. It could clear the way for things like Waymo, Tesla to release release more robo-taxis. I mean, think of it like Tesla's Cybercab, right? That one has it's an electric car with no steering wheel or foot pedals. It's still, testing out, but they just don't want the foot pedals. A lot of these companies say, why do we need it if it's autonomous?
So you have a foot pedal in a Waymo in case you need to jump up there and do it?
Right.
I guess that's the reason. I kind of still want that. I kind of want to have the
I want to be
thing.
able to, if I have to crawl over the seat and smash it with my hand.
You can.
They're spending all this money on these vehicles.
One of these?
They can't pay for a foot pedal. I have not. Have you?
Absolutely not.
No.
You?
I've seen them. No. All over. When I went to San Francisco, they're all over. And people are just in the back seat, just relaxing.
I'm still wary of them.
I can't.
Hey, listen, I was stuck in a cab for an hour yesterday. I had the best conversation with my driver. We solved all the world's problems. I learned all about New York. I need that in my life.
Great New York story.
Yeah.
Can't do that in a Waymo.
Talked about Ghana, talked about the World Cup.
My word.
Had a great time. Waymo can't offer that.
You should have talked about your stew from Uzbekistan.
Well, remember, that's a deep cut for our loyal
This Weekend
audience.
deep cut. We're going to put the recipe out on social.
No Waymos for us and no dog team building for David.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa. All right, if you want more of this, be sure to join us this Saturday, 4th of July, for a special edition of Bloomberg This Weekend, celebrating America's 250. We're going to broadcast live from the Intrepid along the Hudson River in New York from 7 to 11 a.m.
Coming up on Bloomberg This Weekend, the U.S. and Iran trading fire again overnight. Iranian drones target American bases in the Gulf, while the U.S. strikes back against military sites as oil returns to pre-war prices. What the latest back and forth means for efforts to keep the Strait of Hormuz open.
Thank you for your endorsement. Louisiana loves you!
And another primary win for a Republican candidate backed by Donald Trump, this time in Louisiana. Republicans looking to hang on to power in Congress this November. This morning, we speak with New York Democrat Kate Conley, who's hoping to flip a key House seat.
And the knockout stage of the World Cup begins today. Team USA preparing for their big match this week, while fans from around the world descend on American cities.
Welcome back to Bloomberg This Weekend. It is 8 a.m. in New York, coming at you live from Bloomberg's world headquarters in the city here. I'm Christina Ruffini.
I'm David Gura, alongside Lisa Mateo. We're bringing you the latest breaking news, reporting, analysis, live this morning and every weekend from 7 o'clock to 10 o'clock Eastern Time. And of course, we're continuing to follow what's happening in the Middle East, the status of that ceasefire deal that's in place, as we've seen Iran and U.S. go back and forth with attacks here over the last 72 hours or so. We're going to get into all of that in just a minute. But first, let's get to the headlines. Lisa Mateo. Lisa.
You got it. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear has declared a state of emergency. Flash flooding, severe weather. Well, it's killed 4 people in the state. Beshear putting out a warning on social media yesterday.
Be really careful. We know we've already lost at least a handful of Kentuckians. I don't want to lose any more. Be safe, everyone.
Well, to Venezuela, where frustration continues to grow as the death toll from 2 powerful earthquakes surpasses 1,400 international rescue teams. They continue to join the effort. Many civilians who are frustrated by what they see as an inadequate government response, well, they're pitching in to help as well. Another win for President Donald Trump in the GOP primary as Representative Julia Letlow wins the Republican nomination for U.S. Senate in Louisiana.
President Trump, thank you for encouraging me to get in this race. Thank you for your endorsement. Louisiana loves you.
Letlow defeated State Treasurer John Fleming in the 2-candidate runoff after they finished ahead of GOP Senator Bill Cassidy in the primary May 16th. Well, the weekend of attacks continues in the Middle East, with Iran launching drone and missile strikes targeting Bahrain and Kuwait. Sirens sounded in Kuwait City early Sunday. The attacks were in response to U.S. airstrikes that hit the Islamic Republic. U.S. Central Command said Iranian military surveillance infrastructure, communication systems, air defense systems, drone storage facilities, and mine layer capabilities were all targeted. Iran's Parliamentary Revolutionary Guard, well, they threatened complete halt to negotiations if Washington continues its attacks. The U.S. State Department released new details of the deal Lebanon and Israel signed in Washington on Friday without Hezbollah. Under the agreement, Israel will withdraw from Lebanon provided Hezbollah disarms. Now, it also calls for Israel to initially withdraw from two small areas called pilot zones. The Lebanese army will gradually assume full security responsibility over those areas. And speaking at a news conference on Saturday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, well, he called the framework agreement, quote, a historic achievement that strengthens Israel, Lebanon, and weakens Iran and Hezbollah. Meanwhile, Israeli airstrikes at the central Gaza Strip on Saturday evening. No casualties were immediately reported. Earlier in the day, Israeli drone strike killed two Palestinian siblings in southern Gaza. The Israeli military said it was targeting a Hamas militant. And Ukraine has targeted Russian refineries in a new drone attack. In a post on X, President Volodymyr Zelensky, he called the attacks part of Kyiv's long-range sanctions campaign against Moscow. David and Christina, we'll send it over to you.
Lisa, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Lisa. All right, this week on Capitol Hill, a bit of a surprise placation for President Trump after some Republican senators switched their votes on the Iran war powers resolution, rejecting the legislation.
Senators Bill Cassidy and Rand Paul both changed their votes to nay and present, respectively, just hours after a tension-filled lunch with President Trump. Senator Cassidy spoke about the meeting with CBS News.
When the president was berating the four people that voted for the War Powers Act, frankly, I'm not there to be berated. And the president wasn't invited to dish out verbal abuse.
But that's what he did.
I raised my hand. I said, Mr. President, do you just want, is that a rhetorical question that you're asking why do we vote for it? Or are you really interested? He goes, I'm really interested. I stood up and I said, this is why. And I listed those objectives that I did not see being achieved and how the kind of endpoint of the war kept stretching out longer and longer. He began to speak over me. Unfortunately, I raised my volume to match his, and we spoke to each other like that. Or, shall we say, spoke at each other, not to each other.
At not to. Joining us now, Bloomberg congressional reporter Eric Wasson. Eric, let me start with this housing bill, and I kind of look at the trajectory of that. Initially, such excitement and enthusiasm. There'd been some bipartisan agreement on Capitol Hill, which, as you know well, is a rare thing. And then, obviously, that crashed down soon after. We're in this period now where the president says, you know, he's not going to sign it. This 10-day period is underway. What is your best assessment of the path forward here? Is this thing dead? Is it going to come into law by virtue of the fact it's just sitting there? Where does it stand?
I think, if the Speaker of the House will send the housing bill on Monday to the president, he has 10 days to sign, veto it, or let it become law. It sounds to me like when he says he's not going to sign anything until this voter ID bill is passed, he might just let it become law. There's certainly pressure from Republicans in the House and Senate. They really feel like the president stepped on their affordability message. This was a bill that passed overwhelmingly with veto-proof margins, really limiting the ability of private equity to buy up single-family homes, to sort of streamline the environmental improvement process, improvement process for apartment buildings. This was a real feeling they could possibly, on the supply side, lower the cost of housing, which is a real concern for Americans. And then the president basically, and it's Truth Social is saying it's a minor bill, it's not really worth bothering with. So that, this was sent out on social media right as House Republican leaders were having a press conference about it, saying how great it was. So it just shows the different wavelengths that they're on. I think the most important thing I heard in the last week was from John Thune saying it's time to lace up and focus on the midterms. There is a Republican agenda here they're trying to accomplish, but additionally, attacking each other is really taking away from the ability to attack Democrats and to get enthusiastic voters to the polls in the midterms if Trump is out there saying Republicans are doing nothing but worthless legislation.
Can you explain, though, what happens with this bill now? Because I was reading that it could expire, but then it could still pass. I'm a little bit confused. Does it go into effect? Does it not go into effect? Is that unclear?
So under the Constitution, once it's sent to the president, there's 10 days, and he can, if he doesn't do anything, it becomes law. There's something called a pocket veto, but that has to do with right up against an adjournment, which doesn't really happen anymore with a 10-day window. So this would become law if Trump does nothing. He could veto it. He certainly blasted the bill, saying, might lower the value of existing homes. Certainly he has friends in the private equity business who might see their bottom line affected. So that would be an interesting surprise veto on his part. It would go right to the House floor for a veto override. There's no way the Speaker can stop that vote. And, unless people changed its vote, it would be a veto override situation. So, I think it's more likely than not he just quietly lets it become law. But we'll see. He's kind of an enigmatic person in many ways.
No, I want to ask you about a couple of primaries, the ones that we saw take place in New York, the one we saw in Louisiana, the runoff that we saw last night. So Julia Letlow winning that. This is for the seat that Senator Cassidy, we just saw, has held. What's your takeaway from that? I know that the conversation we've been having over these many months is how important, how much of a difference does the president's endorsement make? Here, it seems in Louisiana, it did make a deal of a difference.
Oh, it certainly does. Within the Republican Party, Trump's endorsement is really proving to be very powerful. He was able to oust Cassidy, also John Cornyn, by backing Ken Paxton. Within the party, but will the overall midterm picture allow his party to retain power is a different question. You're seeing people. In North Carolina, for example, we have Michael Whatley, who is very closely tied to the president, down 14 points to Roy Cooper, the popular governor. So, in the end of the day, will it allow certainly Louisiana will remain in Republican hands, but the more the parties identify with the president, who is unpopular, who's Ron Moore is unpopular, perhaps it affects those swing states and swing districts in a way that the Republicans wouldn't be happy about.
Yeah, that's where I want to end, because obviously we've seen a lot of these Republicans run towards the president and towards the right in these midterms, but they've now got to run in a general. We've got some sound from Speaker Johnson on the president and the midterms.
We have the president of the United States running like it's 2024, okay? He's going to tell you that himself here in a few minutes. He's going to tell you. He's out doing campaigns and rallies, and he's going to look right into the eyes of the camera and say, I am on the ballot, because in a real sense he is.
So he's going to party like it's 2024.
That's a wild impression. I just want to interject to say I hadn't heard him do that impersonation before, Eric. So
I had just read the text. I thought the same thing. I was surprised that he went for it. But very briefly, how are Republicans feeling behind closed doors about their prospects in these midterms?
I mean, there's a general assumption the House is gone. We'll see if that, changes in the coming months. But, in a place like Mike Lawler's district, you're going to have his opponent on. He's really under the gun here because Trump is so unpopular and the affordability is the number one issue. Of course, there's a new challenge for Democrats now. You're seeing in New York City, Democratic Socialist candidates going forward. That gives a weapon, actually, to the Republicans. Mike Johnson saying communists are coming. Trump saying he's going to make his July 4th speech all about communism. This is going to be their attempt to say the whole party agrees with some of the beliefs, the defund the police and other beliefs that some of these candidates have espoused. And they're going to try to link that to the more moderate candidates like the running in Mike Lawler's district and saying the whole party is that way. No matter what, it's going to be probably a small Democratic majority. If they do get the majority in the House, it's going to be a big problem for Hakeem Jeffries balancing the demands of these new far left candidates with the centrists and their needs to retain those districts.
All right, Eric Wasson covering Capitol Hill for us. Thank you so much for coming on. Nice to see you as always. We're going to go now back to those New York State primaries Eric was just talking about. One of the most competitive House races is the 17th district. That's northwest of here we are in New York City.
Democrat Kate Conley will face incumbent Republican Congressman Mike Lawler in November. Kate Conley joins us now, and we should note we invited Congressman Lawler to join us. We did not hear back. Kate, congratulations on the victory. And let me just start by the state of play going forward here. I know that the congressman has asked you to debate him, I think, 6 times here after the July 4th holiday. And I wonder if you and your team have come back to him on that and sort of what we should expect in terms of public engagement between you and the incumbent congressman moving ahead to Election Day.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me. And, it is pretty ironic that Mike Lawler just spent the last 6 months doing everything possible to not face me in November, to include having a Republican super PAC spend $1.5 million in attack ads against me in the final week and a half of my Democratic primary. And I'm excited he's looking forward to spending so much time with me. But I will tell you, I do not answer to Mike Lawler. I will absolutely debate him. Right now, what I am doing is building on the incredible work we've done over the last 15 months to reach voters in every corner of this district and to show them that they deserve better and what that can look like. Because at the end of the day, what Mike Lawler's trying to do is create yet another smokescreen to hide his abysmal record and failure to deliver for people in this district. And I'm not about distractions. I'm about delivery, something he's not. And so my job is to make this case to the voters of this district and to show them they deserve better.
I'm not sure how much of that last segment you could hear, but we were talking about kind of this dueling narrative within these Democratic primaries, where here in the city especially, you've got endorsements by, what people would consider more far-left candidates by the mayor, but you've been endorsed by kind of some more moderate Democrats. Are you concerned about the Democratic Party's prospects going into the midterms, and that some of these more liberal candidates could be, as we were just talking about, an easy talking point for Republicans?
So while voters in New York City elected other folks, right here in the Hudson Valley, Democratic primary voters elected a proud West Point graduate, 16-year Army combat veteran with 6 tours overseas, and very proud American. And what I believe the Democratic Party has to be doing is ending any dysfunction. And it goes beyond the Democrats. Like, what voters want to see out of the federal government is it doing its job, solving problems and delivering results. I will tell you, voters are absolutely sick of the political dysfunction, the partisanship, and the political infighting within parties themselves. Voters just want people to get their act together, for parties to get their act together and deliver. And I think as Democrats, we need to lead the way in that.
Do you see the Democratic Party as being a big enough tent to encompass folks like you who are more moderate, who I think prize perhaps more so than these candidates that Christina was mentioning just a moment ago, national security issues, given your background, and them? Or is there a moment here where Democrats have to have a kind of real come-to-Jesus moment, a real degree of introspection about sort of what the party stands for broadly, and maybe the tent shouldn't be as big as it's become?
The Democratic Party should be about delivering results for the American people and making America work for working families again, while maintaining our responsibility to ensure the safety and security of the American people and our nation. Like, there's no debate about what we should be doing. And so we need to focus on actually delivering. Because again, what you are seeing is growing apathy by voters with both parties. All they see is dysfunction and the fact that life here in America over the last several administrations has only gotten harder for working families, and the system is broken. We need to fix that. And political infighting and political silos, like, that's not going to get it done. That's what got us here. So we have to do differently going forward.
I do want to ask you, given your background, what you think some of the most pressing national security issues facing the country are, and what your assessment is of these talks and this conflict with Iran.
Yeah, I'm incredibly concerned with how this administration got us into this conflict in an incredibly reckless and haphazard way. I think a lot of this starts with the Senate and this administration appointed and confirmed what will go down as the most incompetent cabinet in our nation's history. We have very serious national security issues that we must be tackling. You know, in 2026, oceans no longer protect us. There's hypersonic missiles, there's cyber warfare. There's a lot of emerging capabilities that we should be talking about and how do we protect against. We should be talking more about the conflict in Ukraine and how do we stop Russia and Putin's advancement and attempts to destroy the NATO alliance and to take over a democracy, and to learn from how conflict is being conducted there. We should not allow Iran to get a nuclear weapon, and we need to make sure that the Strait of Hormuz is reopened. But yet again, the incompetence of this administration, their failure to build an alliance to get after this problem together, but instead going it alone, and just from the beginning, failing to demonstrate that they've learned anything from prior wars. I say this as someone who's been to the wars in the Middle East. I know what happens when you have an administration that goes in with a poor military strategy, no exit strategy, unclear objectives, and a failure to win over the support of the American people or get an authorization of the use of military force from Congress. And so we have to stop this administration getting a blank check. We have to check its recklessness. You had a president, our president, talking about wiping out a civilization. There's nothing more un-American or unhinged than that. We need to check Trump and his loyalists, and Mike Lawler is failing to do that. Mike Lawler voted 4 times to give Donald Trump a blank check in the Iran war. That is a failure to serve the people he has the privilege of representing.
It's Kate Conley. She's the Democratic nominee in the 17th Congressional District here in New York. Kate, thank you very much for the time. Appreciate it on this Sunday morning. And international aid overnight. Israel carrying out airstrikes on Gaza while international relief efforts continue. More of my sit-down with USAID Administrator Samantha Power. She held that position during the Biden administration. That is straight ahead on Bloomberg This Weekend.
anything we do in Africa is going to be more risky than the U.S. I think the approach we want to take is how are we being compensated for that risk? And one of those is obviously going to be a valuation question. In our minds, valuation is a lot more attractive in Africa, even if we adjust for some of those Africa risks that a lot of Western investors see. So yes, in a lot of ways, you take some of those models that, as I said, might be more asset medium or asset heavy. There might be some more inherent risks. However, if we're saying we're adding some risk because of that kind of model, but we're now solving a core problem as opposed to maybe a nice to have solution in Africa, that might actually offset it. Where if you're solving something that people really absolutely need and can't live without, in a way that then that's a lot less risky. So again, we'd encourage investors to have a less binary view. In other words, the US isn't risky, Africa is risky. That's going to lead to a lot of complications down the road.
From the world of politics to the world of business, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lines deliver news, insight, and analysis live 2 times a day, every trading day. Balance of Power at 1 and 5 Eastern, only on Bloomberg.
People ask me all the time, what is the key to being a really good investor? And I tell them it's to surround yourself with and work with the best investors you can find. On Bloomberg Wealth, I'm going to take you to meet the greatest investors in the world, the people that I would like to have managing my money.
As investors, we are always worried about the issue of the moment. Success is about time in the market as opposed to timing the market.
In case you missed it on Bloomberg Insight.
When they say fair taxes, fair share, what do they mean? Like, I agree with the fact, if it were up to me, I saw Jeff Bezos, who I love, swashbuckling. I don't think the lower people making under a certain amount have to pay any taxes at all. And that's what people seem to want. They think that somehow being anti-business is going to help a city. It's not. So we all want to pay fair taxes. That's not the point. New York's booming, so you're not going to see it in this year's taxes, but a lot of people are paying billions of dollars taxes left. Why do you want that? How does that help the lower paid person in New York?
So what do you make of the beef Mamdani has with Ken Griffin? I mean, there's been a lot of pushback as well from...
my view is, I think vilifying people, simplifying arguments, even if you think it's politically, is a bad idea. And I think he probably realizes that was a bad idea. It's probably why he's seen a bunch of us now.
Don't miss Bloomberg Insight live weekdays.
Today's CFOs are reshaping the C-suite. Bloomberg's chief future officer shines a spotlight on these dynamic leaders. Furniture and home goods retailer Wayfair has long been a heavy hitter in e-commerce. Now it's branching out into brick and mortar stores, and CFO Kate Gulliver loves the challenge.
It is pretty wild to be almost 25 years into the business and be launching an entirely new channel.
Watch Chief Future Officer only on Bloomberg.
Asia is at the forefront of some of the world's biggest stories.
And we're here, where the action starts in Sydney.
And in Tokyo, get ahead as the global trading day begins.
The Asia Trade, weekdays only on Bloomberg.
Thank you for joining us live on Bloomberg This Weekend. I'm Lisa Mateo. Let's update you on today's stories. And this news just coming in, a Saudi Aramco helicopter has crashed in Saudi Arabia, killing all 14 people on board. No word yet on the reason for that crash. An investigation is ongoing. Of course, we'll bring you more information as soon as it does come in. In other news this morning, wildfire activity, well, that has intensified across the western U.S., killing 3 firefighters, injuring 2 others on the Colorado-Utah border. The latest blaze, that's the Cottonwood Fire in southwest Utah. It grew Saturday to more than 144 square miles after barreling through canyons and mountainsides. President Donald Trump said he is nominating a former Oklahoma State trooper and U.S. Marine as the next director of ICE. In a social media post, the president said that Lance Schroyer is a proven leader with decades of experience locking up the worst of the worst. His nomination still must be approved by the Senate. And Amazon's Prime Day, well, it pushed online shoppers to record numbers. According to Adobe, total spending across all retailers in the U.S. for the 4-day period hit $26.4 billion. That's up 9.3% from last year's big discount event. Walmart, Target, they also hosted those overlapping promotions. Consumer research firm Numerator, they say the average household spent a total of $143 on Amazon. That's actually down 8.3% from last year. And I guess they didn't have such great sales. Top selling items on Amazon included protein shakes, trash bags, and cat treats. streets.
Wow.
Who knew?
I wouldn't say I was a skeptic of this. I knew that it would be big, but I was
Prime
cranky
day.
and
I
a
didn't buy
Luddite
anything.
about
Did
it.
you guys buy anything?
I did not. No, but
Lisa, not even the protein shakes? Protein shakes.
Everybody did, though.
My daughter bought enough. I could not. Too many packages. Too many packages.
Fair enough.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks, Lisa. All right, we're going to go back to what we've been talking about for a lot of this morning, and that's this tenuous MOU between the U.S. and Iran, especially as both those parties are trading attacks and threats. The question is whether the MOU will hold as we mark the almost 4-month period of this conflict.
I spoke with Samantha Power, the former U.S. permanent representative to the United Nations, about the deal and whether the White House is, in her estimation, ready and willing to push for the deal to work.
I suppose I am optimistic that the Trump administration wants to end this war for the reason that the war has gone so badly for them. That's not an ideal negotiating posture. The Obama administration's negotiating posture was having mobilized the most severe sanctions against an expanding nuclear program that the world had ever seen, unity not only with our European allies, but also with Russia and China, who threw their weight behind those sanctions. That unity was a major part of and the severity of those sanctions was a major part of the story for why Iran came to the table and accepted the most intrusive inspection regime that had ever been negotiated, and the shutting down of nuclear sites, and the vow to not develop a nuclear weapon. I mean, so many of the concessions that they made were the product of that pressure. The posture that the Trump administration is bringing to the negotiation, especially with an eye, I gather, on the November midterm elections, is gas prices are too high. The Strait of Hormuz needs to be reopened. This hasn't brought about any of our stated objectives yet, including permanently disabling or dismantling their ballistic missile program, or curbing and permanently dismantling their support for regional proxies. And certainly it hasn't brought about regime change, in that the regime is arguably even more hardline and radical, and certainly more militarized, with the role of the IRGC even more central to every decision. So I think, given how it's going, I'm not optimistic that the deal is going to match that of the JCPOA. I suspect it'll be a far worse deal, but even if it were to match, I'm sure the Trump administration will say it doesn't and that it's a better deal. But even if it were to match, even in that happy scenario, and nobody would be happier, I think, than former Obama administration officials to see something like the reconstitution of the JCPOA, the harms done by this war to end up back where the Trump administration in its first term started, to end up, let's say, in that optimistic scenario that they end up back with the JCPOA. What about the Iranian lives lost? What about the Lebanese lives lost? What about the 13 U.S. service member lives lost? What about the toll on the American people of paying, on average, 55 cents more per gallon of gas, which, next to lives lost, of course, is not the most important element, but the amount of needless suffering that this war of choice has brought about is hard to find words for.
Israel was not a party to that memo of understanding that was signed by the president and the Iranians, but it continues to have influence over sort of the course of events here. And there is a chorus, as you know, a growing chorus of people saying the U.S. should reevaluate the way that it manages that relationship with Israel. I wonder if you're among that group, that in light of what we saw after October 7th, in light of what's happened with this war, if this is a moment when that needs to happen.
The Israeli government is fighting wars with nowhere near the regard for civilian lives that our military, at least in every administration I've ever worked for, has demanded. And so that was true in Gaza when I was at USAID, and we were pleading with the Israeli government to allow more humanitarian assistance to flow into Gaza. Very complicated situation in Gaza with gangs and Hamas, and I don't want to in any way downplay the complexity, but you can only control what you can control, and the Israeli government was able to inspect and monitor what went into Gaza and was able, throughout the conflict, to allow far more food and medicine in than it chose to do so. That's just one example. The number of attacks on hospitals, on journalists, the sort of appearance, at least by some individuals within the Israeli government, of lumping all Palestinians in Gaza together, a sort of collective punishment mindset by some, and they're very explicit about it in their statements. That absolutely demands a reevaluation, because it is U.S. weapons in the main that are being used to fight in a manner that departs from the manner that we, in all of our statements vis-a-vis virtually any other country, we demand countries fight.
You did a series of interviews at the end of your tenure. You were still in government, and in a handful of them, you were asked about Gaza and the difficulty of getting humanitarian aid to people on the Strip. In a number of them, you were read passages from your book, A Problem from Hell. And at the time, you said you don't form foreign policy on your own. You're a member of the government, and I think one of your mentors, Michael Ignatieff, said you were reckoning with what he called the dilemmas of power. Now that you're out of government, now that some time has passed, do you think differently about that period of time? Is there more that you could have done under those circumstances?
I mean, it's tough, because I'm here, in an academic setting, and I feel the freedom, of course, to speak and write and all of that you don't have when you're in government. But I'm not helping any Palestinians here in the way that I had the chance to do, even if they understandably were immensely frustrated, not only with the United States, but with U.S. aid and the limits of what we were able to achieve. But, being able to sit down with Bibi Netanyahu and say, this is not okay, and to be able to provide President Biden with the facts of what was and wasn't happening and the civilian casualties that were occurring. I mean, again, you don't get an A for effort, but U.S. aid was the arm of the U.S. government that was pushing the hardest for the welfare of Palestinian civilians to be central to U.S. foreign policy. So we were pushing the Situation Room, but we're also pushing in our interface with the Israeli government. Because of the U.S.-Israel relationship and the, strength and history of the partnership, it was a U.S. aid official who was the equivalent of the red phone when a Palestinian NGO or an international NGO was getting shot at. It was a U.S. aid official who would get the call and say, can you call the Israelis and tell them to stop shooting? And we say to the Israelis, can we just have a red phone between you and the organization? Oh, it's the UN, they're biased, so U.S. aid's role was important, and yet the limits of what we were able to achieve are evident. What could I have done differently? I mean, I wish I had been more persuasive. I wish that when we put in place a process to assess whether the Israeli government was meeting the assurances they had offered about unimpeded humanitarian access, and when USAID came forward and said they're not, I wish that my colleagues had embraced that finding, because USAID was on the ground or our partners were on the ground at the very least in Gaza, and those facts should have been integrated at the highest levels and should have informed the decisions about whether to continue the flow of military assistance. I was not sufficiently persuasive. I wish I'd been more persuasive. And yeah, I definitely spend a lot of time thinking, was there some way, to have somehow taken what we saw was happening on the ground and had it land in a manner that shook us out of the traditional way of doing business? Because Israel wasn't, because of October 7th and the trauma and the horror of what had been done to Israelis, and for other reasons, owing to the nature of who constituted the government. People not in favor of a two-state solution, some individuals who'd never really cared about the welfare of Palestinians at all. But owing to those two circumstances, Israel was not operating and continues not to operate in a business-as-usual manner. And yet there are aspects of the national security establishment that kept operating as if we were in a pre-October 7th kind of relationship.
You can watch that entire conversation at Bloomberg.com/video. Also listen to it on the Big Take podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts. We talked about USAID, of course, talked about the future of the Democratic Party with regard to foreign policy as well. So please take a listen. Watch that if you'd like to see more.
Something we're watching at the moment, the president appears to have gone on a walk out of the White House. He is in Lafayette Square, which is
too rainy for golf, even though he seems dressed for it.
It is pouring rain. We don't usually see the president going out in the rain. He's got a baseball cap on, and he appears to be looking at some of the fountains and statues in that park directly adjacent to the White House across 16th Street there in Washington. We've got the Jeff Mason, our White House correspondent, coming up shortly in the next hour, and maybe by then we will know what this was all about, so stand by to stand by.
Doug Burgum next to him there, Interior Secretary.
But coming up next, the Supreme Court may hand down its biggest decisions of the term this week, testing the president's power after siding with him on a key immigration case. We're going to have that next here on Bloomberg This Weekend. Stick with us.
The countdown is on. Everything you need to get the edge at the end of the market day. Get ahead of tomorrow's trading with The Close. Weekdays on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
Going to be the consequence for U.S. markets? We are seeing modest gains across European equity markets.
Take a look at how we're faring when it comes to Asian markets.
In case you missed it on Bloomberg Tech Asia.
Humanoids are particularly interesting for many reasons. One is that they can actually go into regular everyday environments, which were designed for humans. The other reason from the machine learning perspective is that humanoids have the shape of humans. So perhaps we can learn from humans doing different tasks and transfer that onto humanoids.
Don't miss Bloomberg Tech Asia every month.
What was it like starting all over again? One day you're in a big company, with a big parent, and then you have to start all over again.
You know, it was really exciting and invigorating. I felt like a young kid again when I started Jones Road. And right before we launched, I definitely had a sudden emotion of saying, uh-oh, what if I'm a one-hit wonder? I was a little scared, but then I just threw it up into the wind and went for it.
Jones Road, where'd that name come from?
Well, I sold the rights to Bobby Brown to Estee Lauder when we sold the company, so I couldn't use it again. So we needed a name because I wanted to launch Jones Road the day my 25-year non-compete was up. I needed a name, and I didn't have one. And I was driving to the Hamptons with my husband. My head was down on Waze, and I looked down, I saw Jones Road, and I said, Jones Road Beauty. He said, I like it. And that's how it became Jones Road.
investors, top executives, global innovators. Join me for in-depth conversations with the biggest newsmakers on the day's top stories. Insight with Haslinda Amin, only on Bloomberg.
Mind being called an ideological lunatic or a bunch of left-wing nut jobs?
You know, I've been called worse things than that.
23andMe, I think, is so incredibly valuable. We're coming back.
What magazines were you reading as a kid?
I don't think I was reading magazines until I was in them.
So is it Paradise Ahead or Gattaca?
Maybe somewhere in the middle.
Good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Welcome back to the opening trade.
It's Bloomberg Money.
This is the Asia Trade.
This is Wall Street Week. Welcome to Balance of Power.
You're watching Bloomberg Deals. Welcome to Bloomberg This Weekend.
This is Bloomberg Television.
In case you missed it, on Bloomberg Surveillance.
What is the worst Fed's response mechanism to inflation that is ticking, inflecting upward, given the fact that this Fed has been incredibly dovish? Are they going to wreck the party? I mean, ultimately, it's easy to be a skeptic, but I might as well join the party and not be so, skeptical, because you're not paid to be skeptical. You're not paid to poke holes. You are paid to just go with the mob.
Have we got that breaking news whoosh that drives across the screen? Can we play that now? Sort of breaking news.
It's the job. Come on.
Bramo, I think, gonna look to confirm this, but I think Bramo just turned bullish. Is that what just happened?
I think that it just doesn't pay to be skeptical. You take a look at every single different benchmark.
Okay.
I mean, it's sort of, what are we trading people? We are trading them that you cannot lose, and that seems to be the way to go.
Bulls everywhere this morning, getting very nervous following that.
Don't miss Bloomberg Surveillance, live every weekday.
Technology is embedded in every aspect of our lives, and that revolution is playing out in real time. From finance to defense tech, AI to entertainment, from the road to the stars. Bloomberg is bringing you the stories of companies and people that are pushing tech to new frontiers, and the politics reshaping global tech markets. I'm Ed Ludlow, live in San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Tech.
Every weekday, only on Bloomberg Television.
Thank you for joining us live on Bloomberg This Weekend. I'm Lisa Mateo. Let's update you on today's top stories. Billionaire Democratic donor George Soros, well, he's on his way to shattering his own spending record. According to data from the Federal Election Commission, Soros and his son Alex have spent nearly $103 million in the midterm election cycle. Soros spent $128 million during the last midterms 4 years ago, when he was the biggest single donor. To the PGA Tour, where the Travelers Championship winds down at TPC River Highlands in Connecticut. Topping the leaderboard, Victor Hovland at 20 under par, followed by Scotty Scheffler at 19 under par, and Patrick Cantlay and Ashke Bhatia, they are both tied at 15 under par. Over to the World Cup yesterday, Croatia topped Ghana 2-1. Colombia and Portugal tied at 0-0. Algeria, Austria tied at 3 apiece. England beat Panama 2-0. Congo defeated Uzbekistan 3-1, and Argentina, they topped Jordan 3-1. Today, the round of 32 begins with South Africa taking on Canada this afternoon. Wimbledon kicks off tomorrow in London, and all eyes are on Serena Williams, the 44-year-old star. Well, she hasn't played professionally since her farewell at the 2022 U.S. Open. She will play her first singles match at the event in 4 years on Tuesday, when she faces number 53, Maya Joint, in the first round. And thousands of Vespas, they zip through the streets of Rome on Saturday. They're there to celebrate the scooter's 80th anniversary. The company has sold about 20 million Vespas worldwide. Fans say they just love the charm and the Italian style. You know who is a Vespa big fan?
Who?
Paul Sweeney.
Paul Sweeney,
Bloomberg
that's true.
Intelligence, yes.
I think it's like
Bloomberg
baby
Surveillance.
blue, like a
it is.
blue Vespa.
He rides it down the Jersey Shore. He's all about the Vespa. Loves it.
I've never been on one, but I've always wanted to, and they remind me of Roman Holiday and Audrey Hepburn every single time.
Maybe a sidecar for Brutus.
That would be adorable.
Awesome. Moving on, Lisa. Thank you so much. All right, tomorrow we will hopefully get word on more opinions from the Supreme Court. Key decisions are still on the docket, including birthright citizenship and President Trump's attempt to fire Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook.
Joining us now is Bloomberg Supreme Court reporter Greg Storr, who's been incredibly busy. filing numerous reports on all the decisions we have gotten handed down, waiting on these, of course. Let's take them in kind if we could, and let's start with that Lisa Cook decision. This is about whether the president can do this temporarily, but of course the ramifications extend far beyond that. Greg, get us up to speed on sort of where things stand and how the arguments in that case kind of color what you expect to happen when that is handed down.
Yeah, good morning, David and Christina. This is a huge case for the independence of the Federal Reserve. The president has tried to fire Lisa Cook, a Fed governor, for alleged mortgage fraud. She denies the allegation. And the question before the Supreme Court, as you said, is just whether he can oust her while that legal fight goes forward. The arguments back in January did not go especially well for the president. There was certainly a lot of skepticism that he should be allowed to remove her before she even had a chance to defend herself against the allegations, and to say that he's overstepping his authority. The court was also, though, pretty wary of what this decision might mean down the road for other cases. There's concern about saying too much about what power the president does have to fire somebody. Federal law says that he can fire somebody for cause. Exactly what that means, it has not been spelled out. So we may get a relatively narrow decision that keeps her in office, but doesn't answer every single question.
This is also tied to another case that we're waiting for, which is the FTC commissioner, Slaughter v. Trump, because it's a different federal agency, and it's likely the court is going to support the president in that one, but based on the arguments and what we were hearing from even some of the conservative justices, they seem very leery of the president's power to get rid of Cook. So talk to us about the difference in this case and how you think the court might try to split those different arguments.
Right. So that case is known as Slaughter, named after a Democratic member of the Federal Trade Commission. So it goes back to the 1930s. The Supreme Court at that point said Congress can set up independent federal agencies and say the leaders of them, the commissioners of the FTC, for example, can't be removed unless the president has a good reason, like misconduct. And that laid the legal groundwork for the administrative state that we all came to know. And the Supreme Court has been chipping away at that. And what the court could do this coming week is say, we're going to overturn that big 1935 precedent and say the president can fire the heads of those agencies for any reason because they have executive powers, and the executive power under the Constitution belongs to the president. So he must be able to fire them whenever they're not adhering to his policy preferences. Now, important note, the Supreme Court has suggested earlier that the Fed is not part of that discussion, that the Fed is different, and that whatever it does in this case involving the Federal Trade Commission is not going to affect the Fed. And that's why the Lisa Cook case matters, because there the president says it's not just for any reason. I think she has done something wrong, and that's why I'm firing her. So that's a different category of case.
Greg, the other big one that we're waiting for is this birthright citizenship case. And correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is by statute and by the 14th Amendment, if you have a kid in this country, regardless of who you are, in all likelihood that kid will be a U.S. citizen. The Trump administration wants to change that policy. Again, I'll ask you sort of what the arguments in that case tell you about what outcome we might see here when that decision's handed down.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the 14th Amendment, enacted after the Civil War, says that if you're born in the U.S. and, quote, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, you are a United States citizen. And that has long been understood as you described, basically making virtually everybody who is born on U.S. soil a U.S. citizen. And the president, when he came back into office last year, enacted an executive order that said, I'm going to limit that right to people who are born of either a U.S. citizen parent or a green card holder parent. And that would completely upend this understanding that everybody has had for more than a century. The arguments, again, did not go especially well for the president on that issue. There was a good deal of skepticism, both on the constitutional point and the statutory point. The statutes you mentioned have the exact same language. So with both of those cases, even though this is a very conservative Supreme Court, it would not, both the Cook and the birthright citizenship case, it would not at all be a surprise for the Supreme Court to rule against the president.
One of the other things that I thought was interesting in the arguments is some of the justices were asking John Sauer, who's representing the government, essentially the status of the child would be in limbo and then would have to be litigated for months based on whether or not the parent was determined to domicile there, whether or not they had status. Like, it seems like the adjudication part of that would be just insurmountable, and there's no apparatus to decide whether or not, there's no end point for that, right? That was one of the big arguments, as well as just a lot of case law here going back to the Chinese Exclusion Act, the Dred Scott decision. This has been a long-established precedent the court would be asked to go against.
Yeah, one of the big arguments against this is just that it would not be administrable. If a hospital has to check for a birth certificate of a parent or some other proof of citizenship from the parent in order to decide whether to issue a birth certificate to that child. There's also questions about what it would mean for people who are already born, people who were born to two non-citizen parents in the past. Is their citizenship suddenly in question? So a ruling that sided with the president, that upheld this executive order, would have tremendous implications, and we really don't know what all those implications are going to be. It would be a real challenge for everybody to figure out how it would be applied.
Greg, our last question is a logistical one, and somewhat selfish as well, as we kind of wait for these decisions to come down. So I understand tomorrow, Monday, 10 o'clock Eastern time, that's the first opportunity justices have to hand down these decisions. I gather there's another date in the week ahead. Any likelihood that this gets pushed, that we might get decisions in the week after, for instance?
Also, it's two people who have been on standby 3 weeks in a row along with you for these decisions that haven't come down. Let's have it.
So it's selfish for me too. I certainly hope not. And in fact, I'm quite confident everything will come this week. In my time covering the Supreme Court, the only time the court has gone past the 4th of July was in the pandemic year. And that was obviously a different category because the whole schedule got upended there. I don't know when that second day is going to be, but I would be very surprised if we didn't get the last Supreme Court opinions sometime either Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday.
We'll be waiting for your reporting and analysis. Greg, thank you very much. That's Greg Stohr, covers the Supreme Court for us here at Bloomberg News.
And a very generous colleague who's provided a lot of guidance throughout these weeks to all of us. So thanks again, Greg.
All right, more students are getting a lesson in finance, how schools are preparing kids for their economic future. That's coming up next on Bloomberg This Weekend, on Bloomberg Television, Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg.com, and the Bloomberg Business app.
In case you missed it on the opening trade.
We're holding our breath, and our economists put it very nicely in their recent research note. They're saying, for now, you got the support of tax refunds, so you had the fiscal support. This is running out right now. The real test for the consumer starts here.
How are you going to hold your breath for?
I'm holding my breath in two different ways. The first question is complicated.
Unpleasant.
Well, that's what you have to do as a market strategist. It's unpleasant, complicated, but also exciting, I would say. So we're holding our breath and saying, are you going to reopen that strait? Then secondly, if you don't reopen it, how long can you keep running down oil inventories to make up the shortfall? The equity market's pricing 90%. Prediction markets are saying it's a 30% probability that you reopen it by the end of June. And then if you don't get these supplies back soon, then within the next 3 months, you should start to see macro weakness, not just in Europe, not just in China, but also in the US.
Don't miss the opening trade, live every weekday.
At 9:30 a.m., the market tells you what it's really thinking.
We beat the drum to the opening bell.
With deep analysis of the forces driving the price action.
Focusing investors on what really matters.
Where the money flows, which markets are changing.
Conversations with players shaping the narrative.
Innovative growth companies gravitate to NASDAQ.
It's not just like, let's buy the Mag 7 or AI.
That's a really compelling story.
This is where your trading day begins.
And this is Open Interest.
Only on Bloomberg.
In case you missed it on Balance of Power.
Are you worried about this type of rhetoric? We're now looking at an indefinite extension to the ceasefire.
I think patience and perseverance are what we need here. And bear in mind that the idea that somehow after 47 years of entrenching itself in power, that what the president first said, 4 to 6 weeks, was never realistic. And it's 8 weeks now. It's still not realistic. The issue, I think, is whether we can take back control of the strait in order to allow Gulf Arab oil out onto international international markets. And remember, some of that oil is going out through pipelines in Saudi Arabia and the UAE in any event. But we prohibit the exportation of Iranian oil, open the rest of the strait to get the Arab oil out, calm the markets down. I think we should be prepared to take the time necessary to overthrow the regime. We'll regret it if we let them up and find out later.
Don't miss Balance of Power live every weekday.
In case you missed it, on The Pulse.
It's a $75 billion IPO, the largest in history. I think it presages the beginning of a pretty sizable wave of IPOs, which we're excited about. I also think it shows you that the capital markets, led by the U.S. capital markets, but the global capital markets are demonstrating a willingness to finance this AI infrastructure build and this build in space, which is quite exciting.
Don't miss The Pulse, live every weekday.
Welcome back to Bloomberg This Weekend. I'm Lisa Mateo. Well, as the school year wraps up, a new group of graduating seniors, they are entering the next chapter of their lives. Teachers, they're hoping a personal finance course will give students the financial knowledge needed to succeed. Well, I visited a personal finance classroom at the Brooklyn Preparatory Academy to see how the students are benefiting.
You're going to tell me by the end, first of all, what is Bitcoin? How would you describe it?
Personal finance is the hot new commodity in the classroom, with more schools making it a requirement. According to the Council for Economic Education, 39 states mandate high school students take a personal finance course to graduate, 4 more than in 2024. Leslie Finnan, Senior Advocacy Director for the CEE, says nearly 30 years ago, it wasn't even a thing.
The first year we did the study in 1998, only 1 state required students to take personal finance. This is reaching almost 3 million graduating seniors a year. Research shows that when students take personal finance in high school, they make better financial decisions later. They have higher credit scores, lower loan default rates. When they take out student loans, they take better student loans. They just altogether are better consumers, better citizens, and make better decisions.
This is similar to the chart that I just showed you. Why do you think it was so low for so long?
Because it was new. It didn't have any history.
This fall, all high school students in New York State must have some sort of exposure to personal finance in order to receive their diploma.
It can be embedded in an economics class or a math class, or it could be electives, or it can be a standalone depending on the school and how they want to structure it.
Diana Eisern is assistant principal and financial literacy educator at Brooklyn Preparatory High School. She's been teaching her Money Moves class for 6 years, covering everything from investing in real estate to taxes and budgeting.
For our students, I talk to them about credit scores, credit cards, credit reports, all of that kind of stuff, because if we can get to them prior to making big decisions in their life that are going to impact them for 20, 30, 40 years, and possibly not get them into debt and so that they have to kind of climb out of holes, then we need to do that earlier and just make them aware, make them informed about those things as soon as we can. I want you to look up today's price of 1 single Bitcoin. And I want you to find out how much those pizzas would cost today. Try to show my gas bill, my electric bill, my food, my grocery list, the whole thing. And they're like, whoa, it's like you spend $500 a month on groceries? And I'm like, yeah, that's with coupons, you know? And so what I do is I have an assignment where they go home and they fill out an itemized list of what their family spends on these things. If their family, of course, is comfortable sharing that. And most are overjoyed to share that because they're like, okay, I need this kid to know that we spend $300 on Con Ed, on electricity. And that's why I tell him to turn off the lights in the room when he leaves. I have parents asking me about opening a Vanguard account or Fidelity or E-Trade, whatever the companies are, and they want to come. I've had parents come in. I've sat down with them and showed them in English and in Spanish. So it's a cycle of a ripple effect that continues to expand.
The paper that you guys have, can you please flip it over to the other side?
Leah Mejia is a senior at Brooklyn Prep and a curriculum leader for the class.
I even told some of my family members how to start investing and what to do. And they're just always coming up to me Leah, how do you do this? How do you start? So yeah, it's just mainly interest on how to grow my money and not be so dependent on my family and how to be independent by myself.
Bentley Rivera is a sophomore.
My favorite part of the class was learning about the real estate because I feel like it's important to know how to own a home, how to rent a home, and that was a really fun part of the class.
What do you want to do after high school, after you graduate? And has this class changed what you're thinking about?
My major is going to be in finance. So this class has prepared me like on the basics at least, so I know what I'm getting into.
This class it made me more interested in finance, so I've been looking into other classes and stuff for it.
But while personal finance takes a front row seat, economics has fallen off. Only 22 states now mandate economics for graduation, down from 26 in 2024, yet still up from 13 when the study began in 1998.
Personal finance is just so much more hands-on, visible. Economics is a more academic, theoretical thing. We think that they are both important, and the gold standard would be a full year of economics and personal finance, so a student understands the market and how everything works and also their place in it. We'd rather they do both, but it's hard to argue that personal finance is not important. Every meeting I have, the first response is, yeah, why don't we teach kids about personal finance? So it just makes sense.
And it totally makes sense. But that last piece about how personal finance, now more schools are doing it over economics, is kind of interesting. But just to see how the kids come together, it starts conversations at home. Because I know growing up, personal finance, like I didn't know how to balance a checkbook. Like I didn't know how to do anything. It wasn't something that we talked about at home. So it's good to see the kids doing it.
Yeah, I was thinking back, like in middle school, we had like some course called like consumers where we like did learn in broad strokes about checking accounts. But like, as they were saying, as those students were saying, just learning the basics is so important, and that can kind of kickstart interest in investing in other things.
I didn't have any of this, and I have a degree in foreign affairs and didn't have to take an econ class until graduate school. I had never had an economics class until I got to graduate school because it just wasn't required. So
is this a New York phenomenon, or is it happening widely?
It's happening across the nation, which is nice. But it's interesting to see at this school particularly, and all the work that they're doing, and the teacher just so much energy into it, and opening up the eyes to the kids when she gives them an assignment, like find out what your parents spend on Con Ed, like she was saying. And the kids are like, wow, you spend that much money?
Yes.
Yeah, we do, kids.
It's so smart, because it's really hard to grasp that, I think, as a kid, unless you were actually looking at the numbers and the things that it costs to be a parent.
And it helps when a teacher says it, I've found. I can tell my kids it's a lot of money, and if a teacher says it,
I don't listen to you either.
And they roll their eyes at you.
Yes. All right, Lisa, thank you very much. That was great. Be sure to join us this Saturday, the 4th of July, for a special edition of Bloomberg This Weekend. We're going to celebrate America's 250th anniversary live from the Intrepid on the water in the Hudson River from New York from 7 o'clock to 11 o'clock Eastern Time. We are coming up on 9 o'clock a.m. in New York.
The next hour of Bloomberg This Weekend starts right now.
Welcome to Bloomberg This Weekend, live from New York with David Gura, Christina Ruffini, and Lisa Mateo. The latest headlines, key analysis, big interviews, and the stories that hit home on your days off.
Welcome to Bloomberg This Weekend. We're coming to you live from Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York. I'm David Gura.
I'm Christina Ruffini. We're here with Lisa Mateo. It is Sunday, June 28th. We've got a couple things for you this hour. Of course, going to start with the news of the day, which is Iran, the Strait, and the situation with the MOU after these crossfire events between the U.S. and Iran. But we're also going to look into that incident at the girls' school and the accountability on the U.S. end for how that was accidentally targeted. Was it accidental? We're going to talk to Karina Mason, who's done some new reporting on that. We're going to talk to our friend Kristen Capps over at Bloomberg City Lab about Dulles Airport and if it can ever be made into a world-class airport as the president aspires. And then we're going to end on some fun World Cup. But first, we're going to start with Lisa Mateo and the headlines.
And this news still developing. A helicopter operated by Saudi Aramco has crashed in Saudi Arabia, killing all 14 people on board. No word on the reason for the crash. An investigation is still ongoing. All victims who were on board that aircraft were Saudi nationals. In other news this morning, flash flooding, severe weather. It's killed 4 people in Kentucky. In response, Governor Andy Beshear has declared a state of emergency. The governor put out a word of caution on social media yesterday.
Be really careful. We know we've already lost at least a handful of Kentuckians. I don't want to lose any more. Be safe, everyone.
To Venezuela now, where the death toll from 2 powerful earthquakes surpasses 1,400. International rescue teams continue to join the effort. Many civilians frustrated by the government response are also pitching in to help. Another win for President Donald Trump in the GOP primary as Representative Julia Letlow wins the Republican nomination for U.S. Senate in Louisiana.
President Trump, thank you for encouraging me to get in this race. Thank you for your endorsement. Louisiana loves you.
Letlow defeated State Treasurer John Fleming in the two-candidate runoff after they finished ahead of GOP Senator Bill Cassidy in the primary last month. Well, the weekend of attacks continues in the Middle East, with Iran launching drone and missile strikes targeting Bahrain and Kuwait. Sirens sounded in Kuwait City early Sunday. The attacks were in response to U.S. airstrikes that hit the Islamic Republic. Now, U.S. Central Command said numerous Iranian military sites were targeted. Iran's Parliamentary Revolutionary Guard, well, they threatened a complete halt to negotiations if Washington continues its attacks. The U.S. State Department will release new details of the deal Lebanon and Israel signed in Washington on Friday without Hezbollah. Under the agreement, Israel will withdraw from Lebanon-provided Hezbollah disarms. Now, it calls for Israel to initially withdraw from two small areas. They're called pilot zones. The Lebanese army will gradually assume full security responsibility over those areas. Meanwhile, Israeli strikes hit the central Gaza Strip on Saturday night. No casualties were immediately reported. Earlier in the day, though, an Israeli drone strike killed two Palestinian siblings in southern Gaza. The Israeli military said it was targeting a Hamas militant. And Ukraine has targeted Russian refineries in new drone attacks. In a post on X, President Volodymyr Zelensky called the attacks part of Kyiv's long-range sanctions campaign against Moscow. David and Christina, over to you.
Lisa, thank you very much.
Lisa.
You're laying out all that's happened here over these last 72 hours in the Middle East, and certainly a lot has. Yesterday on the show, Jeff Mason, our colleague who covers the White House, teased the fact he would have a new report out yesterday focusing on the way in which the President of the United States is trying to talk to the American people about the motivations for the war, yes, but also that agreement that was signed between the U.S. and Iran. We're going to dig into that more now with Jeff Mason, who joins us once again on this Sunday morning. Jeff, great to speak with you. And what you lay bare there is the president is trying to couch this in economic terms. He's really jawboning a lot about gasoline prices and oil prices and presenting this as sort of something that's going to lead to a better economic day for America. What are the venues in which he's doing that? And how resonant is that so far with the American people?
Yeah, David, thank you. And talking about it at speeches and events that aren't necessarily supposed to be focused on Iran, and that's not unusual for any president. Any president can bring up any topic that they want to at events like this. But to your question, he brought it up last week during what was supposed to be an economic-themed event in Pennsylvania, and then at a rally on the National Mall the following day or a day later. So it's certainly being sprinkled into his speeches, being sprinkled into his events as the White House wants him to pivot towards an economic focus, which I might remind everyone was what they had planned for him to do all spring. And that was, of course, upset by the fact that he ended up bringing the United States into war along with Israel against Iran. So the Iran war has had a huge impact on his economic message, and he's now trying to sort of needle that in as he talks about what he views as his accomplishments on the economy going into the midterms, and as polls show that Americans are not feeling it with regard to their own economic health.
Jeff, you talked about the president's focus. There's another place he seems to be hyper-focused, hyper-fixated, some might say, and that is on these infrastructure projects. And just a little while ago, we had an unexpected event. We saw the pool camera pop up, and the president kind of wandered out the front gates of the White House and into Lafayette Park, which is right across Pennsylvania Avenue. There is a statue of General Lafayette there. There's a couple cannons. The president stood in the rain, which he does not tend to like to do, and talked to a gaggle of staff members. The Interior Secretary was there, as David noticed and pointed out. Do we have any idea what that was about? Are we getting gold-leafed Lafayette for the 250?
Good question. Haven't heard anything about gold leaf, but I can tell you that area has been blocked off for people for months now. It used to be open and for tourists, for residents of Washington, D.C., and it's been cornered off for some time. Pennsylvania Avenue has been turned into quite literally a parking lot, and I mean that by not only are there cars on Pennsylvania Avenue, but there are parking spaces with lines right in front of the White House and right in front of Lafayette Park. I will say that because I have a pass and people who work at the White House through or in that complex can get in, the fountain in Lafayette Park is working again. And I can't tell you the last time I remember seeing that fountain working. The president has expressed a great deal of pride about getting several fountains around Washington, D.C. working. And so this may be his chance to go out and take a look at that, or take a look at the work that they've been doing in that particular park.
I believe fountain was mentioned in the pool notes, so maybe it's exactly that. And I will say, he did get the fountains in Meridian Park working, and I've lived in D.C. prior to this for decades, and they never worked. And the month I left, he got those fountains working.
Credit where credit is due.
Credit where credit was due.
And no golf on a rainy morning as well, so an opportunity to go out and stroll around the broader plan. Jeff, I look at our latest reporting on kind of the state of play here with these talks surrounding the Memo of Understanding. Talks over the details to end the war due to resume on Monday. Where do they stand? We were having a conversation with Ben Rhodes a little earlier in the show, talking about kind of what technical apparatus might be with these negotiators, with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner as they move ahead here. Any insight you can give us into sort of where we are in the evolution of these talks, who's participating, sort of what's being haggled over, what the brass tacks are at this point?
Well, the broader insight I think I would offer right now is that they're certainly undermined by the fact that the two sides are now fighting again, and that's got to be a very tricky dynamic to go into for technical level talks when the ceasefire that has been agreed is currently at least partially in question by the fact that both sides have launched attacks in the last few days. Now, the president has included in that additional warnings, and I think as early as this morning or last night on Truth Social, his social media platform, that the United States may have to finish what it started militarily. So that is hanging over these talks in a major way. In terms of otherwise where they stand, I think the point of this next round of talks is to get down to some of the nitty-gritty details about the Strait of Hormuz and about the nuclear program, which was, by the way, the reason that President Trump launched the war in the first place, and it hasn't actually played a major role in the talks so far. They've put that off until this next round. So that's what they'll be focusing on. I don't have any specific details on who is leading them, but it will be a lower level of staff member or of administration official who's doing the technical side.
Talking to Jeff Mason about his latest report. We're going to have Jeff stay with us if you would. We're going to move to some other Bloomberg exclusive reporting as well.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the other outlying issues as we go through these negotiations is this attack that the U.S. hit this elementary school in Iran, and Katrina Mance is going to join us now because we have new Bloomberg reporting. According to her report, an intelligence analyst misremarks an issue with the connections between the U.S. intelligence systems are among some of the errors made leading up to that strike. Katrina, thank you for joining us. So explain to us what happened. At some point, this was a naval operated facility. It had something to do with the Iranian military, and then its status changed. It did turn into an elementary school, but somehow whatever database, whatever system the Pentagon, the DoD was using for targeting didn't get updated. Explain to us how that worked.
That's what we're reporting. What we understand happened is that possibly in 2019, an intelligence analyst noticed changes in a building. As you say, this is a building that was part of an IRGC naval base. If you look at satellite imagery today, you see that there's a wall, a fence line that separates it, and that facility, in fact, changed to a school. The key issue is why the US didn't catch that. And what we understand is that an intelligence analyst did notice changes in 2019, made remarks about those changes in a digital intelligence system, a database, but that database was not connected to the main, what's called authoritative targeting database that the US keeps and uses to plan operations with. And so these changes were never surfaced to the very system that the US uses to plan operations or to the military commanders who make decisions about what and when to strike and what to prioritize.
Katrina, what context can you give us on how the Pentagon does this kind of analysis? There was a line in your piece that stood out to me from an expert with whom you spoke, who said these aren't like the sexiest jobs in the Pentagon right now. They're not prioritized. And I wonder, sort of from a personnel perspective, what this belies. Is this a big issue, not having the right people in place, not having the right procedures in place to do the kind of cross-checking that clearly didn't happen here?
There are a couple of things. The US is still today relying on a system that was evolved from the 1980s that has been found as recently as 2020 as deficient. And yet 6 years later, they still haven't moved over to the new updated machine-assisted system, which of course now also needs to soon incorporate AI. So they're very behind in even updating their systems. But secondly, the point you raise, I spoke to a retired Air Force General, Jack Shanahan. He's a retired 3-star. And in 2017, which is after this school use started at this particular facility, he said that the US was facing a real problem, that targeting had essentially become a moribund career field, and that he had great difficulty recruiting targeters. That, in his analysis, is because the US had for 2 decades been focused on the global war on terror, as the US called it, and was focused on counterinsurgency and counterterrorism, and wasn't ready for large combat operations that require really going building to building and analyzing in advance what those buildings might be. And so for years, he has argued that insufficient effort has been paid to the targeting profession, and that there was always going to be a problem if ever large-scale combat operations were undertaken.
Jeff, I'm wondering, I mean, just horrendous loss of life here, 120 children, nearly 200 people total. What have we heard from the White House? Have they ever issued any kind of official apology for the incident? I know the president on Wednesday said it may not ever be possible to determine fault, and he doesn't think the U.S. to blame. Is that consistent with statements we'd heard from the Pentagon and other places in the administration?
I think so, but I think you're right to ask that question, and I admire Katrina's reporting here, in large part because I think this story has not gotten a great deal of attention since the actual strike, and that's sort of a reality of the news cycle here, is that so many things happen that really big and really important stories sometimes don't continue to get the attention that they do or that they require. I would also add to that just a little piece of my own reporting, which is I spoke to a Democratic strategist last week about the Democrats' broad strategy going into the midterm elections, and her view was that the Democrats, on their own messaging with regard to Iran, need to focus on that school and need to focus on competence and the competence or the lack thereof that the Trump administration has shown, not only with regard to the war, but with regard to the economy. That, of course, now I'm quoting her, that's her view, but that could be something that we see bubbling up in messaging from the Democrats as they try to take over power in Washington during the midterms and really underscore what they see as failures by the Trump administration on both economic and foreign policy, and this would be one of those examples.
Katrina, we have your rigorous and eye-opening and sobering reporting available at Bloomberg.com and on the terminal. There is an official investigation that was launched, and I'm curious what you can tell us just about the status of that. So picking up on what Jeff was saying, there has been a degree of happy talk both from the Pentagon and the White House that the investigation would be able to follow its course, the conclusions would be made available. What is the status of that investigation? Indeed, how rigorous is that?
3 things. I understand that the investigation was submitted in April and that it's under review at CENTCOM. CENTCOM is US Central Command, the military theater that is actually conducting those operations against Iran. So that's the latest status. But it's really important to remember that Secretary Hegseth at the Department of Defense said absolutely they will make it public. This is an investigation that many people are clamoring for, from human rights campaigners, including several in Congress as well. And I spoke to a former chief of the Defense Intelligence Agency, that is the agency that runs the intelligence targeting database, Robert Ashley. He was there under the first Trump administration. And critically, he called on the government to make public that investigation. He said that Americans need to trust its intelligence services community, need to trust that they will become clear with the public about how it does targeting, how it reviews things in line with the law. And I think it's a real sense of rising pressure from even those within this military defense intelligence community wanting answers and wanting answers raked over in public.
Jeff, I want to ask you about that accountability issue, because not only has the strike, from a psychological ops perspective, given the IRGC, Hezbollah, opponents of the U.S. A tool to use in their rhetoric, but it also seems to go to what you and Katrina have been talking about, which is this larger idea of lack of accountability at the Pentagon. Very quickly, we also have General Donahue being forced retired, and Admiral McRaven, who was in charge of the bin Laden raid, wrote an op-ed this week saying you have the right to fire generals, but the people have a right to know why. Have we seen any kind of movement from the White House that they need to protect their own liability here and be more transparent with why they're making some of these decisions?
I think my answer to that question, Christina, is that the president really likes and supports Pete Hegseth. And there are multiple mistakes that people outside of the administration would point to with regard to the Secretary of War or Secretary of Defense that in other administrations might have led to his departure. And that has just not been the case here because the president sees him as someone who is an example of central casting. That's one of President Trump's favorite phrases. Yep. And so I have not picked up on any concern at the White House about these firings that you're referencing. That said, we know that the president can turn quickly on members of his cabinet or members of his staff. So TBD as to whether this might have an impact later.
TBD. Jeff Mason, our colleague covering the White House, Katrina Manson, thanks to you as well for your fine reporting. Again, available at Bloomberg.com and on the terminal.
Yeah, definitely go check it out. All right, it's the most expensive governor's race in U.S. history. Republican Steve Hilton, a one-time conservative commentator, talking to our colleague Michelle Hussein about his vision for California. That's up next on Bloomberg This Weekend.
Power Players is back to take a look under the hood of the business of Formula One.
Hi, I'm here to see Pierre Gasly.
Welcome to my workplace.
Do you feel pressure?
Massive pressure.
Ferrari is the best example that we can be very proud of the past to look after the future.
From the iconic brand setting the standard.
Oh boy.
Can you imagine Ferrari without racing?
No, and I say no, no, no.
To the newcomers forging ahead.
I grew up my whole life racing against the boys.
This global phenomenon continues to chart new territory.
This was a tennis court 8 days ago.
I can't even believe that. And the speed of the business has never moved faster.
My career might stop. I'll still be driving some.
Yeah. Probably very fast.
Yeah.
This is so exciting!
This season, we're along for the ride.
Welcome to the world of decentralized finance. Bloomberg is covering all things crypto, the people, the transactions, and the technology. Bloomberg Crypto, Tuesdays only on Bloomberg. It's Jobs Day, and Bloomberg has the report under surveillance.
Things have started to pick up in this economy based on the jobs number.
But there is a lot of concern about why the labor market is not keeping pace with what we're seeing right now in the AI space.
This Thursday, Jonathan, Lisa, Anne-Marie, and Mike will bring you crucial data and expert analysis at terminal speed.
The unsaid thing is that we're basically at full employment.
Apparently the labor market right now, not a problem.
The June Jobs Report, Thursday on Bloomberg.
Oh, hello there. Just wanted to say, Primer is back. We've been scouring the frontiers of science and technology to help explain the difference between the next gold rush and whatever this thing is. And in season 2, we're upping the stakes. More danger.
Now that is some high-grade uranium mineralization.
We used to have a stable climate on this Earth. Right now, we do not.
More science.
We're pushing the envelope of technology in multiple directions. Software, hardware, chemistry, physics.
The cable is like very cold.
And more CEOs that can nail the photo shoot.
Hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars are at stake.
While the problems are economic, the solutions are too.
And yes, we will be talking about AI.
There is a lot of humanoid hype out there.
But our future doesn't run on hype. It runs on innovation. Watch season 2 on all these lovely channels.
Technology is embedded in every aspect of our lives, and that revolution is playing out in real time. From finance to defense tech, AI to entertainment, from the road to the stars. Bloomberg is bringing you the stories of companies and people that are pushing tech to new frontiers, and the politics reshaping global tech markets. I'm Ed Ludlow, live in San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Tech.
Every weekday, only on Bloomberg Television.
Making money isn't about drowning in emotions. It's about understanding what's actually happening. Markets are the best way to glean signal from noise, and that is what we try to do every morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Thank you for joining us live on Bloomberg This Weekend. Let's update you on today's top stories. Wildfire activity that has intensified across the western U.S., killing 3 firefighters, injuring 2 others on the Colorado-Utah border. The latest blaze, which is the Cottonwood Fire in southwest Utah, it grew Saturday to more than 144 square miles after barreling through canyons and mountainsides, destroying part of a ski resort and numerous cabins. President Donald Trump said he is nominating a former Oklahoma State trooper and U.S. Marine as the next director of ICE. In a social media post, the president said that Lance Schroyer is a proven leader with decades of experience locking up the worst of the worst. New Department of Homeland Security Secretary Mike Wayne Mullen, he praised Schroyer as a great pick to protect the American people. His nomination still, though, must be approved by the Senate. Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix, they're expected to announce hundreds of billions of dollars worth of new investments tomorrow. South Korean press is reporting that the country's president is set to host a, quote, national briefing on the 3 major mega projects for the Great Leap Forward of the Republic of Korea. Also tomorrow, Alphabet set to replace Verizon Communications in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. That happens prior to the opening of trading on Monday. David and Christina.
Lisa, thank you very much.
Thanks, Lisa. One of the most closely watched races this November is in California, and it's the battle to replace Governor Gavin Newsom, who is term limited and may have eyes on a bigger run in 2028.
After the state's crowded jungle primary earlier this month, the top 2 candidates are set for November general. Democrats Javier Becerra, the former health secretary, will face Republican Steve Hilton, the British-born conservative political commentator.
On the latest episode of Michelle Hussein's show, Hilton spoke about his background and why he says the plan for the Golden State, his plan for the Golden State, is the right one.
As the years went on, I felt that I wanted to get back into actually doing things rather than just talking about things. I love California. Been living here since 2012, raised my family here, started a business here. I could see that things were going off the rails pretty badly from a policy point of view. So I started a policy organization, Golden Together, started working on some of our big problems in California. I then started engaging with Sacramento, trying to advance those policy ideas through the legislature. And that was the point where I realized just how dysfunctional and broken California's system of government is. Because every single meeting I had with legislators, Democrats, Republicans, it was the same story. Yes, you're right. These policies you're advocating would make a huge difference. We'd get more housing built. We'd lower the cost. All those things are true. However, it can never happen because the unions won't allow it. The climate activists won't allow it. The system just can't make it happen. And I just realized then that something has to change. Otherwise, this state that I love is just going to continue to decline.
Yeah, it's the state you've made your home, in the country that you've made your home, having left the UK. And we're going to dig into all of this and the nuts and bolts of your campaign in a moment. But I just want to understand you more broadly to start with. Would you say that being on Fox, having that kind of prominence on TV, that's got to have played an important role in rising in the Republican Party, right? Donald Trump, it helped his rise because he was known from television and he was a fan of your show on Fox.
I think that's right, that it gives you a platform. But I think it's that combination, actually, of media experience, policy and government experience and business experience that actually is a good fit for this role, not only of running for governor, but as I plan to be being the next governor.
But when did you actually become a Republican? Because 2017, you were very clearly saying you weren't partisan and you were neither Democrat or Republican.
Well, it's interesting. In many ways, I think the campaign I'm running is not particularly partisan. It's based on some broad common sense principles that I think most people can get behind. So I've never thought of myself as a particularly partisan person. However, there are realities about running for office in the US. It's basically a two-party system, and of course I identify very much with the principles that underlie the Republican Party, just as I do the Conservative Party, where I worked for some years and was part of a coalition government led by a Conservative Prime Minister. The basic ideas that you would associate with the center-right are ideas that I share in terms of limiting the role of government, enhancing individual freedom. Those sorts of things have always been part of my political philosophy and therefore connect very much with the Republican Party here in America.
I, of course, remember you from your time in the UK, working for David Cameron, before he got elected, after he became Prime Minister. You were part of that effort to detoxify the Conservative Party, to make it more electable, bring it into more of the centre ground, more socially liberal, more climate conscious. Are you still the same guy who did that?
Oh, very much, very much. I understand that some people who haven't been following the intervening years may look at that and say, well, it's very different. David Cameron's a very different personality to the president who's the leader of the Republican Party in America today. I can see that very clearly, but everyone has their own personal style. But the ideas that really drove that process of change for the Conservative Party, in particular, focusing on people who've been left behind, on dealing with poverty and inequality, on helping working people. That was a really big part of the work that we did 20 years or so ago with the Conservative Party. And that's a big driver of what I'm really arguing for here. And there's many other similarities as well. I think perhaps the broadest one is a sense of that I've always had, which is a sense that we need to put power in people's hands and enable them to fight back against establishments or systems or centralized power that benefits a small group rather than the majority of people. That's always been a really important driving force.
Yeah, but what you did for David Cameron, the person who you still say you are, that is very, very far from not only Donald Trump himself, but MAGA. And I just wonder how you reconcile that, because you are endorsed by President Trump himself. What you're representing yourself as is, I think, more the Arnold Schwarzenegger wing of the Republican Party in California. And he's someone who endorsed Kamala Harris in the last presidential election.
Well, I don't think it's quite as the boxes are quite as neat and defined as that. I'm endorsed by many different kinds of Republicans. Of course, political parties are coalitions, and as I say, I think this campaign, everything I'm arguing for is not particularly partisan. The fact that we've got Democrats supporting the campaign is an example of that, and I think that what I've always tried to focus on is really the substance, the ideas, specific things. I'm a pragmatic candidate in this race, not an ideologue. The arguments I'm making about how we need to turn California around. We've got the highest cost of living by far. I'm not sure it's appreciated around the world, because you look at the headline for California, we're the fourth biggest economy, and there's a sense of complacency there on the part of the current leadership. They keep saying that as if that answers all questions. Underneath that, this is a state that's in real trouble, especially from an economic point of view. And the solutions there actually go across party lines. They're just practical things to make life easier for families and businesses. So I think this whole conversation around, labels and whatever doesn't really get to the point about what is needed in order to help California get back on track.
Okay, but I don't think you can bat away being the fourth largest economy in the world quite so lightly. This happened last year. It was the fifth largest then. California overtook Japan under Gavin Newsom. It doesn't feel like a failure to many people in the state, I would suspect, and certainly to people outside.
Well, I think it does to many people inside, because they're struggling to even live. That's why during Gavin Newsom's tenure as governor, nearly 2 million Californians have actually moved out because they can't live here anymore because it's so expensive. Let's just look at that number, the fourth biggest economy in the world. That's driven by two things that don't actually tell a story of health in terms of our economy. Partly, it's driven by a very small number of tech companies, fantastic success stories, which I strongly support. I'm very proud of the fact that we're leading the AI revolution in California. They generate enormous amounts of revenue, but not very many jobs. The second part of the story, in terms of the size of our economy, is that it includes the size of government. They've doubled the budget of the state of California in the last 10 years or so. Meanwhile, the results on every measure, education standards, the quality of our infrastructure, the highest unemployment rate of all 50 states, the highest poverty rate of all 50 states, tied with Louisiana. I think if we don't change direction this year, California really is heading for economic disaster. I've heard from so many business leaders that they're waiting to see what happens in November. And if we don't vote for change in California, they're out. And the exodus of businesses from California that you've seen in the last few years could turn into a stampede.
On people leaving, there's an aspect of this on which you could agree with Gavin Newsom, which is that he is trying to stop the wealth tax on billionaires that's been proposed by one of the labor unions. He's determined to try and stop it because he thinks it will drive more people away. So, area of agreement, yes, between you and Governor Newsom?
Very much. Although I have to say, given his close relationship with the unions, I would have hoped he would have acted sooner to stop that even becoming a consideration. For example, right now, there's a process going on in Sacramento, very typical it's kind of horse trading process where it's possible that the union itself will take it off the ballot now because they're negotiating some other kind of agreements. That could have been done a year ago.
Yeah, but he's working on this.
And then
he's working on this, that's the point.
No, I agree with that. But as often with Gavin Newsom, a little bit more attention and focus earlier would have worked wonders.
What do you think is going to be your biggest hurdle in this race in the next few months?
Well, I think it's actually a belief that we can turn the desire for change. There's no question that California wants change. Every single piece of data you look at shows that. There's a clear majority of people who think that we're on the wrong track and that we need to change direction. Now, what you've got to do is close that gap between the desire of people for change and actually voting for it by doing something that they haven't done in sufficient numbers in recent years, which is actually voting Republican. And so my job is to say, look, I'm running as someone with a positive, pragmatic plan for very specific benefits that will help you in your life. $3 gas, cut your electric bills in half, your first $150,000 tax-free, starter homes for young people so they can afford to buy a home in California. These are positive, practical things. And my job is to get out there and show people how it can be done. And then I think we'll win. I'm very confident of that.
You're going to need to have Democrats vote for you, essentially.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a clear requirement that, given the numbers that you've seen in recent years, of course it's true that Democrats and independents, as it's called in California, no party preference voters, need to join our movement for change. They already are. I mean, we've been doing events up and down the state for a year now, town halls, hundreds of events. Thousands and thousands of people now have come out. Many times people come along. They're open to everybody. And many times someone would stand up and say, I'm a Democrat. I've never been to a Republican event before. I voted for Kamala Harris, but something's got to change in California. You're already seeing that happen.
We invited Hilton's opponent, Democrat Javier Becerra, to join us on the program. We did not hear back. You can watch the full episode of The Michelle Hussein Show here on Bloomberg Television and listen to it everywhere you get your podcasts.
We saw President Trump outside the White House this morning checking out the restoration projects around the nation's capital. Up next, we're going to check in on his plans to remodel Dulles International Airport with City Lab's Kristen Capps. That is coming up on Bloomberg This Weekend on Bloomberg Television and Bloomberg Radio. Stay with us.
Day is about to start.
And you're already looking for that edge.
The opening trade brings you everything you need to know as markets open across Europe.
I'm Guy Johnson.
I'm Anna Edwards.
And I'm Tom McKenzie.
This is your opening trade.
Only on Bloomberg.
People ask me all the time, what is the key to being a really good investor? And I tell them it's to surround yourself with and work with the best investors you can find. On Bloomberg Wealth, I'm going to take you to meet the greatest investors in the world, the people that I would like to have managing my money.
As investors, we are always worried about the issue of the moment. Success is about time in the market as opposed to timing the market.
When news breaks,
a redhead across the Bloomberg terminal.
Bloomberg has you covered.
Trump's global tariffs are struck down by the U.S. Supreme Court.
For all the context and clarity you need.
There's going to be now tons of tariff headlines until midterm elections.
Hear it first on Bloomberg. Today's CFOs are reshaping the C-suite. Bloomberg's chief future officer shines a spotlight on these dynamic leaders. Furniture and home goods retailer Wayfair has long been a heavy hitter in e-commerce. Now it's branching out into brick-and-mortar stores, and CFO Kate Gulliver loves the challenge.
It is pretty wild to be almost 25 years into the business and be launching an entirely new channel.
Watch Chief Future Officer only on Bloomberg.
My old mentor, Roger Staubach, who told me when I transitioned, football will never leave you, but you need to leave it.
Wow.
Everyone has a dream, and a lot of dreams are, you know, my dream is to play football and play professional football, and you get the dream comes true, but it is going to end. And the day it ends, the day before it ends, you're one of the best in the world. Great. The next day you wake up, that's gone. What are you great at? And the truth is nothing, right? I'm not great at anything else.
I talk about it all the time, Steve, is this whole idea of it's not from penthouse to penthouse. And what I mean by that is you played for 15, 20 years and you're in the penthouse. That doesn't mean that you come to the business world and you're gonna be in the penthouse. You don't start on the third floor or the lobby. You actually have to start in the basement.
From the world of politics to the world of business, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lines deliver news, insight, and analysis live 2 times a day, every trading day. Balance of Power at 1 and 5 Eastern, only on Bloomberg.
Asia is at the forefront of some of the world's biggest stories.
And we're here, where the action starts in Sydney.
And in Tokyo, get ahead as the global trading day begins.
The Asia Trade, weekdays only on Bloomberg.
As an exchange, what can you do to make it more attractive to be a publicly traded company?
Talk to our customers. We spend a lot of time with our listed companies, listening to their concerns, and then act as an advocacy group for those companies to allow a company to tell their story in the most efficient way possible and reward them for the good disclosures that they are making in the market.
Is there any sort of financial innovation that you could drive to get more companies to list? Tokenization has come up.
Well, we did announce our tokenization initiative earlier this year. We already built the technology, we've already done a variety of proof of concepts. It allows for instantaneous settlement 24/7, but it is going to be a platform that runs in parallel to our more traditional exchanges.
In case you missed it on Bloomberg Tech Asia.
Humanoids are particularly interesting for many reasons. One is that they can actually go into regular everyday environments, which were designed for humans. The other reason from the machine learning perspective is that humanoids have the shape of humans. So perhaps we can learn from humans doing different tasks and transfer that onto humanoids.
Don't miss Bloomberg Tech Asia every month.
Thank you for joining us live on Bloomberg This Weekend. I'm Lisa Mateo. Let's update you on today's top stories. Another sign of AI infrastructure constraints. Google has placed limits on Meta Platform's use of its Gemini artificial intelligence models. The Financial Times says it's because it couldn't provide as much computing capacity as the social media company wanted. To the PGA Tour, where the Travelers Championship winds down at TPC River Highlands in Connecticut. Topping the leaderboard, Victor Hovland at 20 under par, followed by Scotty Scheffler at 19 under par, and Patrick Cantlay and Ashkay Help me out here, David.
Batia.
Both tied at 15 under par. I nailed it. In World Cup action yesterday, Croatia topped Ghana 2-1. Colombia and Portugal tied at 0-0. Algeria, Austria tied at 3 apiece. England, they beat Panama 2-0. Congo defeated Uzbekistan 3-1. And Argentina, they topped Jordan 3-1. Today, the round of 32 begins with South Africa taking on Canada this afternoon. Wimbledon kicks off tomorrow in London, and all eyes, yes, Serena Williams, the 44-year-old star. She hasn't played professionally since her farewell at the 2022 U.S. Open. She'll play her first singles match at the event in 4 years on Tuesday when she faces number 53 Maya Joint in the first round. And prediction markets, they are lighting up with Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce wedding questions. David, this one's for you, you Swiftie. Beyond the location and timing of the event, other categories include possible bridesmaids and groomsmen, likely guests, and whether or not the couple will even find time to catch a World Cup game. There you go, David and Christina.
In December of 2025, President Trump announced plans to renovate Dulles International Airport, citing that it was, quote, incorrectly designed.
We're also going to rebuild Dulles Airport because it's not a good airport. It should be a great airport, and it's not a good airport at all. It's a terrible airport. It was incorrectly designed with a good building. Actually, it's got a beautiful terminal. We have a design that's amazing for Dulles. It's going to take Dulles and make it a really it was a badly designed airport. We're going to make it into as good as there is in the country. It'll be exciting.
As good as there is in the country. That's part of a $22 billion pitch aiming to remake the Washington area airport into one of the best in the world.
How feasible is that? We're joined now by Kristen Capps of City Lab. Kristen, great to speak with you. The first question I had written down that I wanted to ask is what's wrong with Dulles Airport? But maybe we could all take we could all take a turn answering that question. But this is an airport that
we have so many opinions.
Let me get started. Very far outside of Washington, D.C.
David's ready to go.
Antiquated technology. Yes, some architecture of note, but not a very easy place to get
carpeting.
Christina?
The carpeting.
Okay.
You're trying to drag your suitcase along this friction carpeting, and the buses, the people mover buses, where you rush off the plane, you're so excited to get out, and you have to wait for everyone else who was on your plane to load into this bus to drive to the other terminal because they still don't have trains. All right, your turn.
Pile on, Kristen. Anything else you want to add?
Jump in here.
You know, the real problem with those people movers that you're supposed to load into is that they weren't designed as cocktail lounges like they were originally meant to be. I think it might be a little easier if you had
they were really supposed to be
martini in
cocktail
your hand
lounges?
as your gate was moving. They were supposed to be. That was the idea. It was going to be a very kind of Jetsons vibe. You sit down, you have a drink, and then your gate just takes you to your plane. But as anyone who's flown into Dulles knows, that is not the vibe.
No.
Let me just sort of ask you where we are. We heard the president there saying Dulles is going to be great. It's going to be an airport like it should be, et cetera, et cetera. We had the creation of this Beautifying Transportation Infrastructure Council. Has anything tangible come out of that? Sort of what are the plans for Dulles that we know of?
The Department of Transportation put out a request for ideas. They said, send us your suggestions. What do you want to see at Dulles? And they received a couple of dozen different responses, ranging from very fantastical renderings to just comments from, the peanut gallery. And after that, there was a much bigger submission, a bigger proposal that came from United Airlines and the Metropolitan Washington Airport Authority. Those are the entities that run the planes out of Dulles and run Dulles itself. And what they had in mind was a $22 billion revitalization plan that would make it arguably the best airport in the country.
And that plan has an 8-year timeline. As you mentioned, it is United. If you are a United frequent flyer, as some of my friends are, spend their lives going out to Dulles rather than flying out of the much closer Reagan, which is closer downtown D.C. But 70% of the flights out of Dulles are United Airlines. Can they get this done in 8 years? And is it worth it to them? What do they have to gain? Because people are already held hostage to the points that they are accruing. They're going to go out there regardless.
I mean, just to put it in context, it's difficult to imagine any kind of airport, upgrade taking place on a timescale that quickly. And this is like many, many upgrades happening all at once. It's a $22 billion plan that could be broken down into 5 or 6 multi-billion-dollar plans that involve the construction of new concourses, the expansion of an underground air train to unite them, and unfortunately for those fans who might be out there, the shelving of the quirky people movers.
You mentioned the price, $22 billion. I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that United will not be ponying up the entire amount of money there. Who would pay for this reconstruction, this reinvention of Dulles?
Yeah, so to give you some context, $22 billion is about what Qatar paid for Doha. It is an incredible amount of money for an airline. And Qatar, is able to do that because they make airports a big national priority in the Middle East and in Southeast Asia. In the United States, it's a little bit different. This is not going to be directly government funded. This is not going to be paid directly by United. It's going to be paid by passengers. And based on the estimates that we've seen from the reporting on this, that could be $100 extra for every ticket just to pay the debt on this expansion.
Wow, that's crazy. All right, before we let you go, last time you and I hung out in Washington, we did a little tour of some of the monuments that have had facelifts at the behest of the president,
or might get them,
or the president's name put on them. And I know you have spent some time at the Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool. What is the update there? Where are we with this?
The vibes are not great in Washington. It looks like a site of a natural disaster, really, not just because the pool is green and also a little bit blue with things floating in it, whether it's algae or paint slabs, but also because there's fencing all around. Now you can't get anywhere close. And if you try to, as I did earlier today, you will get shooed away by National Guard. The National Guard presence in D.C. is really astronomical. It's about doubled to, I think, 4,800 soldiers. So it's some kind of event for 250 here in D.C.
Some kind of event, indeed. Look, we go to you for insight into architecture and urban planning. Talk a bit just about the unique challenges of these reflecting pools. This is not the first time, we should say, that there's been a giant algae bloom in these waters on the National Mall.
Tilting at windmills or hoovering reflecting pools seem to be the same kind of Futilian expert.
What are the inherent problems with the plan as it was implemented here to build these reflecting pools on the National Mall?
Well, not to put too fine a point on it, but it's really geese. Canadian geese, the ducks
You're
that
blaming
stay
the
there.
birds?
Yes. I'm sorry to say, but the geese have really grown a lot in Washington, D.C., and it's made the reflecting pool a little bit more problematic for maintenance. But in general, when we're talking about maintenance of these unique monuments, there are very large teams of people that make sure that these things are done according to a series of really Byzantine laws and historic preservation codes, and there are federal oversight bodies. And the Trump administration is not going through that process, to put it mildly. They are calling contractors and starting the work and then asking the questions later.
Is there any long-term concern, we've only got a couple seconds left, that a lot of these things that have been quote-unquote refurbished are going to have to be fixed again in a more measured way, in a more historically accurate way, and in a more lasting way all over again?
I think that, eventually they can get the reflecting pool right. They're going to drain it after the 4th of July and start over. The bigger question, of course, is the White House East Wing and what the ballroom is going to look like and whether that's ever going to get finished.
And if the claw remains. The claw is still there, if I'm not mistaken. The giant UFC arena, still there?
It's been taken down, and now it looks like a vast scorched hole in the South Lawn.
Excellent. You and I will have to go get kicked out of there next, because you and I got pushed off the Kennedy Center grounds. You've done the reflecting pool. We'll add a third one to our list.
Kristen Capps of
I'm sure we can make it happen.
Correspondent covering urban planning, architecture, scorched holes on the White House lawn, algae, reflecting pools, airports. Always good to speak to you, Kristen.
So nice to see you, buddy.
Thanks so much.
Kristen's the best. All right, when we come back, World Cup fans are taking over Boston from pubs to public transit. We're going to check that out ahead of the knockout round. Stick with us.
Anything we do in Africa is going to be more risky than the U.S. I think the approach we want to take is how are we being compensated for that risk? And one of those is obviously going to be a valuation question. In our minds, valuation is a lot more attractive in Africa, even if we adjust for some of those Africa risks that a lot of Western investors see. So yes, in a lot of ways, you take some of those models that, as I said, might be more asset medium or asset heavy. There might be some more inherent risks. However, if we're saying we're adding some risk because of that kind of model, but we're now solving a core problem as opposed to maybe a nice to have solution in Africa, that might actually offset it. Where if you're solving something that people really absolutely need and can't live without, in a way that then that's a lot less risky. So again, we'd encourage investors to have a less binary view. In other words, the US isn't risky, Africa is risky. That's going to lead to a lot of complications down the road.
Mind being called an ideological lunatic or a bunch of left-wing nut jobs?
You know, I've been called worse things than that.
23andMe, I think, is so incredibly valuable. We're coming back.
What magazines were you reading as a kid?
I don't think I was reading magazines until I was in them.
So is it Paradise Ahead or Gattaca?
Maybe somewhere in the middle. In case you missed it on Bloomberg Insight.
When they say fair taxes, fair share, what do they mean? Like, I agree with the fact, if up to me, I saw Jeff Bezos, who I love, swashbuckling. I don't think the lower people make it under a certain amount have to pay any taxes at all. And that's what people seem to want. They think that somehow being anti-business is going to help a city. It's not. So we all want to pay fair taxes. That's not the point. New York's booming, so you're not going to see it in this year's taxes, but a lot of people are paying billions of dollars taxes left. Why do you want that? How does that help the lower paid person in New York?
So what do you make of the beef Mamdani has with Ken Griffin? I mean, there's been a lot of pushback as well from...
My view is, I think vilifying people, simplifying arguments, even if you think it's politically, is a bad idea. And I think he probably realizes that was a bad idea. It's probably why he's seen a bunch of us now.
Don't miss Bloomberg Insight live weekdays.
Technology is embedded in every aspect of our lives, and that revolution is playing out in real time. From finance to defense tech, AI to entertainment, from the road to the stars. Bloomberg is bringing you the stories of companies and people that are pushing tech to new frontiers, and the politics reshaping global tech markets. I'm Ed Ludlow, live in San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Tech.
Every weekday, only on Bloomberg Television.
Welcome back to Bloomberg This Weekend. I'm Christina Ruffini with David Gura and Lisa Mateo. Okay, so South Africa is going to face Canada today in the World Cup's first knockout stage match in LA. But one of the biggest stories of this North American tournament is the cultural influx in American cities, particularly in Boston.
From Scots to Haitians, Boston has been a hotspot for memorable moments. We are joined now by Boston Globe's Emily Sweeney. Emily, great to have you back with us once again. I was in the greater Boston area last week. I was in Cambridge, and someone with whom I spoke said, the thing to get are these fan bands. They were talking about going down to the Common, to the Garden. These are like bracelets. You can get them that have kind of site-specific accoutrement. What's the flavor been like in Boston? The Scots have left, but this is still very much
talk to us about the accoutrement, Emily.
Obsessed city.
Well, I gotta say, Boston really misses the Scots. It's, you know what I mean? It's amazing to see there's still traffic cones on statues' heads that are appearing. The Tottenham started that tradition, and I think that tradition with the traffic cones going on statues' heads is going to continue, at least from what I've seen.
That's Tartan and not Taunton, the city in Massachusetts. I just want to be very clear about that. I feel like I have to make that editorial note. Yes, okay, all right.
Don't let him give you shade. We've got, for our video viewers, we've got my favorite cone video, which I requested from our producer, is where the city of Boston seemed really down with this and let them use a cherry picker so that they could cone a statue that would have been otherwise out of reach. And this is like, I don't know, they do this in Scotland. It's a
Why is it happening? Why is it happening?
I don't know. Emily, do you know?
Well, there was estimated to be about 50,000 Scottish folks who visited Boston. And again, nobody was prepared for the traffic cone trick to be... suddenly appearing on everybody from Bobby Orr right in front of the Boston Garden. I got a photo of that. Somebody put a cone on his head. He looked great, like diving after making his goal. Wearing a cone. Looked better than ever. But yeah, no, I mean, the Scots really made an impact here. And, a lot of other people that local fans are cheering on. Haiti, Cape Verde, obviously making it to the knockout round is huge. People are going crazy about that.
I'm so excited.
I got to ask you, Emily, so you mentioned the Scots, okay? So Boston, you think St. Patrick's Day, that's a big drinking day, okay? But the Scots outdrink this. I mean, did you party with these guys or what?
They literally drank Boston out of beer.
Yeah. You couldn't walk out of the Globe newsroom. There were just kilts everywhere on the streets of Boston. Seriously, I've never seen so many kilts in my life. And, everybody I spoke to from Scotland was just so friendly, so cool, so nice. And the bars, there were lines out the door. I was walking to work in the morning, and there literally were lines, to get into the bars, full of Scottish fans. But, everything was really cool because as much as they drink, it was very peaceful, no fighting or anything like that, just a lot of good fun, a lot of good vibes. And like I said, all the Scottish people I talked to were so cool and so nice.
A lot of good kilts as well. I understand your mayor is going to formalize this. Michelle Wu has formalized this kind of relationship between Bostonians and the Scots. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so there was an announcement made about being like a sister city of sorts, like a formal partnership with the city of Glasgow. And I know personally my friends who are now planning trips to Scotland to visit, people that weren't even thinking about going on vacation there. So, it was really cool. I think, I witnessed history getting made, on the streets of Boston. I've never heard so much singing in my life on the streets of Boston. And now it's a little bit quieter now that the Scots have left.
You mentioned, I will say, they did go to Miami and try the traffic cone trick, and the Miami-Dade police were not into it. It was not allowed. You mentioned the Scots, you mentioned the Haitians, Cape Verde, but there's another fan headed your way. This is this viral Twitter star, Freddie. He's been tweeting his adventures in America. He's gotten, everyone is following him, just a joyous trip through our nation. What does Boston have in store? What do you expect with the German fans coming to town?
Yeah, well, I wish I knew what Freddie looked like.
You don't. We have pictures now, and he's got a little smiley faces on his friends, and he puts different soccer players in front of his face. Yeah.
Yeah, last I saw, he was in Agunquit, which I got to say, hands down, is my favorite beach in New England. Yes. He picked a good one. But yeah, we're hoping Freddie comes down, and we're just hoping everybody has a good time. And that's what's been happening. I mean, I think Boston wasn't prepared for how much fun the World Cup has been. And, I think we're embracing it. Oh. So we're looking forward to it.
Emily, what do you think about Team USA? Do we have a chance? I mean, you seem to be the World Cup know-how. Tell us.
Yeah. Well, I Cape Verde has my heart, I gotta say. I don't want to sound like a traitor, but Team USA made it to the knockout round too. I mean, I'm looking forward to watching them on Wednesday. I think it's gonna be interesting to see what happens next. With the slate of teams that they're gonna be facing. But making it to the knockout round in the World Cup is huge. So for Team USA and for a small country like Cape Verde, oh my God! And with Cape Verde, it being their first time ever. So I got two teams I'm going to be rooting for sure.
Very quickly here, we're complaining a lot about traffic and all the transportation issues here in New York.
It's been rough in New York.
How's Boston been handling it? How's the trek out to Foxborough been for folks?
The first trips, when I was talking to people who went out to Gillette Stadium, a.k.a. Boston Stadium, there were really long lines, but I mean, those lines were there, to make sure the flow of people, they wouldn't get bottlenecked. But from what I've heard, it got better as as the games went on. So I think the first ones people had to wait a long time, but other than that, there weren't any major issues that I've heard of.
All right, the Boston Globe's one and only Emily Sweeney. You've gotten this new job since we saw you last. It's a perfect fit. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I love her.
Amazing. Boston deserves this joy, and I feel like America deserves the joy. I'm so glad this is going well so far. All right, thank you for joining us on Bloomberg This Weekend. I'm Christina Ruffini.
I'm David Gura alongside Lisa Mateo. Join our colleagues in Asia this evening when global markets kick off trading at 7 o'clock Eastern Time.
We'll be back with you Saturday at 7 a.m. Eastern, live from the Intrepid. The Michelle Hussein Show is next here on Bloomberg TV, radio, and all your platforms.
Bringing you up up-to-the-minute geopolitical news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Oliver Crook at the G7 leaders meeting in Evian-France, and this is Bloomberg.
Sometimes people have asked me, well, how did you end up supporting President Trump? In many ways, I think the campaign I'm running is not particularly partisan. However, there are realities about running for office in the US. But look, he's not on the ballot, and this is a point of choice for California.
Steve Hilton, once a British political strategist, now a Trump-backed Republican running for governor of California. Do you agree with his decision to go to war in Iran?
Well, look, I'm just focused on this race.
You really don't think the voters of California deserve to hear you express a view on that? You're trying to be a leader of the state.
No, I understand, but there's plenty to fix and focus on in California.
From Bloomberg Weekend, this is the Michelle Hussein Show. Over the next few months, the US political climate is set to become even more intense as we approach the midterms. This November's set of elections will mark the halfway point between one presidential vote and the next. And while the main focus will be on Congress and whether the Democrats can seize control of one or both houses, there are some fascinating races elsewhere. One of them is the race to be the next governor of California. It's a notable Democratic-leaning state, but it has had Republican governors. Ronald Reagan, more recently, Arnold Schwarzenegger. And this time, a Republican is through to the final stage, one of the two candidates who'll be on the ballot in November. His name is Steve Hilton, and he's unusual, not least because he only became a US citizen 5 years ago. He's someone whose name I've known for about 20 years from his time embedded in UK politics, working for the Conservative leader David Cameron before and after he became Prime Minister. So when I saw Steve Hilton's advance through the California governor primary, I knew I wanted to understand it. He's up against Democrat Javier Becerra, who used to work for Joe Biden. But California is such an important place economically, not just in US terms, but globally. And that means this conversation does go beyond state matters.